Chapter 185. Outside the galactic duel arena. Dozens of guard spaceships hovered in the sky, and on the ground of the plaza below, teams of alien guards armed with high-tech equipment surrounded the arena in 3 circles. Be careful. Blade and 2 monsters broke out of the prison. They're all powerful creatures that can take on 100 people by themselves. Once the target appears, use the voltage paralysis net to capture him. The deputy chief guard picked up the communicator and gave the order sternly. The guards held their breaths nervously, not even daring to breathe too loudly. They were fully focused on maintaining their alert state. Behind the guards, Carnage's eyes glinted coldly. He reminded in a low voice, "There's also a man called Kale. He's the main culprit behind the riot in the underground prison. If you see him, don't capture him. Just shoot him." "Yes." The deputy chief nodded solemnly. He was about to relay the order to the communicator. At this moment, the ground they were standing on began to tremble violently. Amidst the cries of the guards, a crack appeared on the ground somewhere in the stadium. Roar. Accompanied by a sharp and hoarse beast roar, gravel and dust exploded from the crack and swept in all directions. A huge black shadow suddenly broke through the wall of the underground tunnel and violently raised its 2 heads. "It's the 2-headed monster. Everyone get ready." The deputy chief raised his right hand. The guards focused their attention on the huge black shadow not far away. However, the next scene made their jaws drop in shock. The huge black shadow raised its body high in the middle of the dust wave and roared. Suddenly, it fell back powerlessly and crashed to the ground with a loud bang. What's going on? The guards were confused and opened their mouths wide. The dust that blocked their vision gradually settled. They could clearly see that the monster overlord, the 2-headed snake, had half of its body still in the underground tunnel. The upper half of its body lay lifelessly on the ground. Its snake body had been cut open from the inside out by a sharp weapon. Its body was almost cut in half. Fresh blood flowed out from the cut like a fountain. Looking up, the guards all shuddered. Carnage, who was in the back, showed an expression of horror and disbelief. A silver-haired youth stood on the head of the 2-headed snake's corpse. His entire body was bathed in blood, and most of his clothes were torn, revealing his steel-like body. He slowly straightened his back and looked down with his cold eyes. His domineering and ferocious aura was like that of a demon god. "Oh my God, he killed the 2-headed monster." The guards sucked in a breath of cold air. Not only that, look at the underground tunnel. Under the horrified reminder of the guards, they looked through the collapsed outer wall where the double-headed snake had crashed through. The corpse of the sickle man with a bloody hole in his chest was lying on the pile of rubble in a tragic manner. The championship hasn't even begun, and 3 of the top 4 challengers have already been killed by the invaders? Thinking of the tentacle child who died at the beginning of the riot in the underground prison, the guards at the scene felt their scalps go numb. Looking at Kale, who was standing with his back straight, there was no part of their body that did not feel cold. They instinctively took a step back out of fear. To be able to kill 3 monster-level creatures, he was without a doubt a monster among monsters. But no one knew that this was the moment when Kale's body was at its weakest. He had temporarily lost his super soldier ability, and he had used up too much of his stamina from the continuous battle. Now any creature could push him down. Life was like a play, and it all depended on acting skills. Relying on the word stubbornness, Kale struggled to maintain his standing posture. He glanced around coldly with an expressionless face, using his aura to intimidate the guards and spaceships around him. For a moment, the galactic stadium square fell into silence. No guards dared to attack Kale first. What are you waiting for? Do it. There are so many of you, and you're still afraid of him? Carnage could no longer sit still. His body and soul were trembling from fear. As he kept retreating, he clenched his teeth and said. Hearing this voice, Kale looked up. His gaze passed through the layers of alien guards and landed on Carnage, who was 20 meters away. There was a clear look of understanding on his face. "Oh, so you're here." Carnage's face instantly turned pale. He could not attack the man in front of him. This was a hard wound, so he could only borrow other people's methods. "As the general manager, I order you to open fire," Carnage growled. The guards finally realized what was going on. They gripped their laser guns tightly and aimed at Kale, who was in the center of the encirclement. "Vice, is the fighter jet not remotely here yet?" Kale asked in a low voice. "Sorry, the fighter jet seems to be detained in a sealed underground area. It can't break through," Vice quickly replied. "Is that so? Then we can only break through by force." Kale took a deep breath. A creature card was quietly held between his 2 fingers. Kale and the guards were ready to attack when a small spaceship suddenly came from the direction of the central building toward the square. The exterior of the spaceship was painted with bright and cool colors. The disc-shaped body of the spaceship blocked the sun and cast a large shadow. Not only did the many guard spaceships floating in the sky have no intention of stopping it, they even took the initiative to move aside, leaving enough space for it to fly. They also lowered their altitude as if they were afraid that they would steal the limelight from the small spaceship. "It's Grandmaster. Grandmaster is here," someone said. Then all the guards looked at the small spaceship with respect. The small spaceship floated in the sky. Grandmaster himself had no intention of showing himself. He sent out a dozen or so spaceships, piecing together light to project a three-dimensional holographic projection of himself. Grandmaster's huge projection looked down at Kale. Kale looked up calmly at him. "Grandmaster, he broke into the underground prison and killed 3 of the top 4 challengers." Carnage said loudly. "I know." Grandmaster actually smiled. He looked at Kale and applauded. "Intruder, if it were any other creature you would have died long ago. However, you are very strong. This is what I am very interested in, so I will give you 2 choices." "What are the choices?" Kale asked calmly. Grandmaster held up 2 fingers. 1. Become my enemy and immediately face the pursuit of the entire planet's guards. 2. Replace the dead challengers and participate in the championship match in 2 days. I will give you 10 seconds. Kale interrupted him. "I choose the second choice. No matter what, as long as he could buy 2 days for his body to recover, he would have a much better chance of fighting or escaping. You are a smart creature. I have high hopes for you. I hope that in 2 days you will be able to surprise me in the arena." Grandmaster laughed loudly, and the holographic projection faded away. Kale smiled faintly, knowing that the crisis had been temporarily averted. The guards in the plaza secretly sighed in relief. Only the general manager of Carnage's symbiotic relationship had an ugly expression on his face. After that, Kale was obediently escorted by the guards to the isolated single room in the central building. Although there were still layers of protection such as laser doors and spatial cloisters, and 2 nerve paralysis control devices, the single room he stayed in had its own bathroom, lounge, and even an activity and fitness area. A series of high-tech smart facilities. The environment was much more luxurious than the hotel he had stayed in before. Chapter 186. Saka Main City, Central Building, Challenger's isolated single room. The shower in the bathroom splashed hot water. Kale was lying in the bathtub tired and weak. His eyes were closed as he took a bath with his strong and lean body naked. The smell of blood and ammunition gradually faded away under the constant washing. His heart was beating violently. The wounds on his body began to heal naturally under the stimulation. There was not a single scar on the surface of his bronze skin. Kale opened his eyes and tried to clench his fist. The strength that he had lost quietly returned. That was close. Kale sighed softly. He had almost fallen into a desperate situation where he had to fight for his life. This could not go on. The genetic disease was getting more and more serious. As long as this problem was not eradicated, he would not be able to feel completely at ease. The most helpless thing was not encountering an undefeatable enemy. It was that there was a serious problem with his body that he could defeat. Kachak kachak. Following the sound of some kind of metal device breaking, a small mechanical life walked into the bathroom. Its hands were holding a clean towel and a bath towel. Its mouth was chewing on a mechanical device that looked like a surveillance camera. The end of the wire was still hanging out of its mouth. Kale got up, wiped himself clean, and walked out of the bathroom with a bath towel wrapped around his lower body. Vice followed behind him and swallowed the metal wire. He reported, "All the surveillance cameras in the open and hidden corners of this isolated room have been removed." "Not bad. How's the investigation I asked you to do?" Kale sat on the sofa in the hall and asked. "Following the AI equipment here, although we only hacked into 1% of the building's AI system, we did find another isolated room. It's 5 floors away from this floor, and the security measures are more than 3 times stricter than this one," Vice said slowly. Kale rubbed his smooth chin and pondered, "You can't completely hack into the building's AI system? The only thing I know about this planet system is the computer system database that the fighter comes with. Also, the building's AI control system is very advanced. If I try to hack into the system forcefully, there's a 99% chance that I'll be discovered and locked onto." Vice shrugged like a human. "You don't have to completely hack into the building's system. You just need to hack into another room." "I want to know what kind of creature lives inside," Kale said in a deep voice. If he guessed correctly, The other isolated room was occupied by the champion creature that had dominated the Saka duel arena for the past 6 months. About half a year ago, it coincided with the time when Enli and her brother picked up the broken axe. Was the champion creature related to the broken artifact of the Aso gods? Kale had a feeling that it was real. Perhaps the champion creature would have a suitable ability card that could help him solve the problem of his genetic disease in one fell swoop, allowing him to break through his current physique and evolve. This was also the main reason why he still took the risk and chose to stay here. If he pursued temporary safety, then Kale could force his way through the central building's isolation room after his physical strength and injuries had recovered. He could then find a fighter or spaceship and fly into the giant wormhole in the sky to leave this planet. I'll do my best. Vice nodded. Suddenly, it seemed to have sensed something and quickly jumped onto Kale's shoulder. It shrank and transformed into a nerve paralysis device at the side of his neck. Its movements were smooth as flowing water and completed in less than half a second. As soon as it completed this process, the isolation room's AI door slowly opened. I'm here to deliver lunch. A young girl dressed in an attendant's dress carefully walked into the isolation room with a plate of food in her hands. She lowered her head and didn't dare to look at Kale, who was sitting on the sofa. Put it on the table. Kale stared at the attendant girl. He suddenly felt that she was familiar, but he didn't know where this sense of familiarity came from. The table was only 3 meters away from Kale. The attendant girl hesitated for a moment before quickly approaching with the plate. The girl's hair was pure black and her skin was fair. Her small face had delicate facial features and her appearance was very similar to a human's, except that her ears were slightly long and pointy. Her body that was wrapped in an attendant's dress couldn't hide her graceful figure. When she was 3 meters away and he saw the card that appeared on her body, a look of realization appeared on Kale's face. Then I'll take my leave. The attendant girl seemed to have sensed Kale's gaze. She quickly put down the plate and was about to leave quickly. Wait a minute. Kale stopped her and patted the seat next to his sofa. He smiled faintly and said, Aren't you going to come and sit? We've known each other for a long time. Who knows you? I don't remember. Yi pretended to leave, but Kale added lightly, I even helped you escape the city guard's pursuit. Have you forgotten so quickly? I wonder what will happen if a grandmaster finds out that his attendant is a criminal. Yiji's body stiffened and stopped. She turned around to look at Kale, who was only wearing a bath towel. Her expression changed slightly as she said, It's you, the guy in the black leopard combat suit? Why can't it be me? Kale shrugged and said. The girl in front of him was one of the criminals with the unawakened night elf genes. You're a ruthless person. I heard that you broke into the underground prison and killed 3 creatures that advanced to the top 4. This news has been temporarily sealed and is only spread among us. If this gets out, the entire planet will probably be in an uproar. Yi sighed. Knowing that Kale was the one who escaped the pursuit of the guards with her, she completely lost her previous cowardice. That was just an accident. Kale narrowed his eyes. He was still brooding over Venom's betrayal. It was like a thorn in his flesh that couldn't be erased. Do you know that you're in a terrible situation right now? In 2 days you'll be the only challenger to challenge the champion of the arena, the Demon King. Yi reminded him kindly. I know. Kale nodded calmly. Yi said seriously, even if you can defeat a monster like the two-headed monster, you're still no match for the Demon King. In the past half a year, the Demon King has completely defeated all challengers he met. He's basically killed them easily with one hit. He's never used his true strength. Kale looked at Yi and said after some thought, If you want to help me, then help me gather some information. Why should I help you? What's in it for me? Yi asked. She was far from being as harmless as she looked on the surface. If you don't help me, I'll tell the Grandmaster that you're a criminal. Kale had Yi's weakness in his hands, and with just one sentence, he had hit her soft spot. Yi stomped her feet and asked angrily, What information do you want? I want to know the details about the leader of the guards. Kale said coldly. Chapter 187. 2 days passed. Tonight was the night of the highly anticipated championship match. There was still more than half an hour before the start of the match. All the aliens on the planet were celebrating. They either carried support flags and walked on the streets or flew into the sky in spaceships. They all flocked to the galactic arena to fight for the best viewing point. At this moment, central building in the fitness area of the challenger's isolated room. Kale's shoulder-length silver hair had been trimmed into a vigorous buzz cut. He wore a pair of shorts and his muscular upper body was bare. He was warming up with a huge barbell in his hands. The muscles on his arms bulged as if they were made of steel. The barbell that weighed half a ton was moved back and forth like a toy. "Master, everything is ready?" Vice, who had transformed into a nerve-control device on his neck, informed him. "Okay." Kale nodded and put down the barbell. The heavy barbell hit the floor with a deafening thud. Yi, who had just opened the laser protection door and walked into the isolation room, was shocked and exclaimed. Kale picked up a towel and wiped his sweat. He looked up at Yi and said calmly, "It's not delivery time now. Why are you here? Aren't you afraid of being suspected by Grandmaster's guards? Why are you still so calm?" Yi rolled her eyes at him. The girl's slender and fair face could not be seen due to her elven genes. "Isn't it good to be calm? It's like you're panicking." Kale shrugged and teased her. "I thought you wanted me to provide you with information so that you could find a chance to escape in these 2 days. Now that the championship match is about to start, why are you still here?" Yi was anxious for him. She suddenly widened her eyes and said in disbelief, "You're not really going to participate in tonight's championship match, are you?" "Why not?" Kale narrowed his eyes as if he was thinking about something. Yi shook her head. "Crazy, you're really crazy. You're thinking this because you haven't seen how scary the Demon King is. No, it's the exact opposite. It's precisely because I know what kind of strength he has that I want to continue staying here." Kale chuckled. His expression was serious and solemn. His hands were clenched tightly, far from being as relaxed as he appeared. Over the past 2 days, he and the Vice had yet to find a reliable way to break through the multiple defenses of the central building to spy on the Demon King champion in the other quarantine room. On the other hand, the general manager of Venom Symbiosis had a basic grasp of the information. However, after trying to summon the Broken Axe seemed to have a subtle divine reaction to the creatures on the isolation floor a few floors above, as if due to the short distance between them. There was an 80% chance that the champion Demon King was a member of Thor's Aesir clan. Knowing this information, no matter how dangerous it was, even if he had to become enemies with the entire planet, Kale would stay without hesitation. Hadn't he left Earth and entered the starry sky for this day? The ability cards of the Aesir race had always been Kale's first choice. As long as he had the genes of the Aesir race in his body, his physique would undoubtedly evolve to another level. It would also solve the problem of the body's genes collapsing and reassembling due to radiation. This was truly a step from hell to heaven, a juncture where danger and opportunity coexisted. Everything depends on this. Kale took a deep breath, his eyes filled with determination as his aura continued to rise. He must win. Even if the enemy was a god, it would not make him cower. He would bet everything he had in the future on this battle. Half an hour later, night fell as expected, and the thick darkness shrouded the main city of Sokka below. At this time in the galactic duel arena, countless spaceships and lights were projected from the arena, illuminating the area as bright as day. Under the cheers of hundreds of thousands of planet creatures, the hubbub of voices condensed into a tangible sound wave, crashing into the empty and repaired duel arena below. In the audience seats, the Only siblings and Bai Bo sat close to each other in the front seats. "Big Sister Only, it has been more than 2 days since that day. Is there still no news from Mr. Kale?" Bai Bo's face was heavy as if he had put in a lot of effort for the past few days. His white hair was dispirited and dull. "I don't know much either." Only helplessly shook her head and sighed. "That day, I was directly chased out of the arena by the guards. Although I have been asking the Sokka guards for news these past 2 days, when the guards heard Mr. Kale's name, they were all terrified and did not dare to reveal too much. I only know that Mr. Kale is still safe and sound, but I don't know where exactly." "What exactly happened that day? Didn't Mr. Kale just go to visit the challenger?" Bai Bo clenched his teeth and was about to say something when suddenly, the lights of the galactic arena flickered, and more than 10 small spaceships flew into the air above the duel arena. "The match is about to begin." Bai Bo's words changed as he, the Only siblings and the millions of extraterrestrial spectators all focused their attention on the duel arena. Light and shadow blurred as the projection of the Grandmaster scanned the surrounding audience seats. He opened his arms in welcome and said with a smile, "Ladies and gentlemen, good evening." The audience immediately responded with a wave of enthusiastic cheers. The Grandmaster slowly said, "I know that tonight's championship match is something that everyone has been looking forward to for a long time. However, before the match begins, which is to say before we invite out the challengers, I would like to inform everyone of a very important matter." When the audience heard this, they all consciously lowered their cheers and looked at the Grandmaster's projection in confusion. What could be more important than the championship match? First of all, the semi-finals will be skipped. As soon as the Grandmaster's voice fell, the audience immediately went into an uproar, their faces filled with confusion and depression. Don't be anxious. The Grandmaster smiled and continued, the reason the semi-finals will be skipped is because 2 days ago, an intruder broke into the underground prison and killed all 3 of the semi-finals challengers. What? This news was like a bomb, causing the extraterrestrial spectators in the audience seats to be shocked and suck in a breath of cold air. A creature alone killed 3 semi-finals challengers? How was this possible? Could it be? And Li and Bai Bo looked at each other, their faces filled with unparalleled shock. The intruder's battle record undoubtedly has the strength to challenge the champion of the arena. Therefore, the championship match will be directly between that challenger and the Demon King. The Grandmaster took a deep breath and said loudly, now, let us give a round of applause to the only challenger of tonight. Chapter 188. In the arena, the lights shone down, and the sound of footsteps could be heard coming from the underground passage leading from the main entrance. Amidst the applause and cheers of the extraterrestrial audience, Kale walked out forcefully and stood tall and straight on the spacious arena, his eyes serious and serious. He held a machine sword and a shield in his hands. His perfect human physique was wearing the silver metal armor provided by Sokka's guards, and he looked like an immortal god of war who had experienced wars big and small. Oh my god, it really is Mr. Kale. In the audience area, looking at the fully equipped figure in the arena, Only, her brother, and Bai Bo were completely speechless for a moment. On the floating platform high above the galactic arena, in the viewing room where the Grandmaster and his trusted aides were, Slaughter sat in the seat close to the Grandmaster and looked down expressionlessly at Kale, who was directly below him. With a voice that only he could hear, he whispered to himself, I know your strength better than anyone else. You are indeed terrifyingly strong, but no matter what, you will never be able to defeat the defending creature that is far superior to the human race. As if hearing his voice, the tempered glass bottle in the pocket of Slaughter's windbreaker trembled slightly, and a crack appeared on the bottle that was already full of cracks. All right. The challenger has come out. Now, let me invite tonight's main character, the defending side. The Grandmaster was very good at stirring up the atmosphere, and the defending side's popularity had already been settled, so in an instant, the applause and cheers that were 10 times louder than Kale's instantly exploded. A humanoid figure slowly appeared from the entrance of the passage opposite the main entrance. In the arena, Kale looked nervous, and his palms that were holding the sword and shield were sweating. Looking straight at the tall figure that was about to break through the door, he could already feel a strong sense of oppression in his heart. The biological overlord that has defended the championship ring 6 times in a row, the undisputed king. He is the Devil King Kratos. After the Grandmaster's impassioned speech, the tall figure had just walked out of the passage. It was a tall and powerful bald man. His face was rough and bold, and his left eye was painted with red lines. He had a thick black beard on his chin, and iron chains were wrapped around the back of his hands. His body was like a bear's back and a tiger's waist, and he was simply wrapped in a primitive leather jacket that could not be considered protective equipment. The moment he appeared on the stage, his powerful and heavy aura swept out, immediately causing the audience to go wild. Demon King! Demon King! Demon King! Ignoring the audience's shouts, Kratos strode forward and looked straight at Kale, who was standing in front of him. He said in a low voice, Are you my opponent this time? Who else but me? Kale's heart thumped violently, and he panted slightly to hide his uncontrollable fear. It was like a cat or dog encountering a lion or a tiger. The level of their biological chain was far higher than their own. Even their bloodline and genes were throbbing. Was it really a divine creature that he had to defeat? Please enjoy this match to your heart's content. The Grandmaster's holographic projection disappeared, announcing the official start of the championship duel. He had to strike first and gain the upper hand. He had to take the initiative in the battle. Kale's eyes were firm and resolute. He stomped heavily on the air behind him, and a series of white waves burst out from where he stood. The energy tide was turbulent, and his speed instantly soared to supersonic speed. Air sprint. It was an auxiliary skill that accelerated in a straight line. Kratos stood motionless on the spot as if he hadn't reacted yet. In less than 0.1 seconds, Kale's figure had blurred and crossed the distance of 20 meters, arriving in front of his opponent. In the air, Kale held the long sword held high in his right hand, and in coordination with air sprint, he suddenly slashed down at Kratos' exposed neck. He was well aware of the gap in strength between them, so he seized the opportunity and took the initiative to explode. This slash contained all his strength. It was an extreme performance that could be exerted with 10 times the strength of a human's body. Ding. As soon as the long sword fell on Kratos' neck, Kale's face was aghast. He felt the web between his thumb and forefinger tremble violently, and the long sword trembled so much that it almost fell out of his hand. It was as if it had hit a hard vibrating metal shield and couldn't penetrate it. How is this possible? Kale's mind went blank. He was full of confidence in air sprint, and even a god wouldn't be able to dodge it. But he didn't expect that the slash, which should at least cause serious injury, couldn't break through his defense. At this distance, he focused his mind, and the ability cards on his opponent were also revealed. Nearly 1,000 ability cards of 3 colors, white, green, and blue, appeared and rotated around Kratos' body, almost blinding Kale's eyes. One of the ability cards floated above the bald head like a divine king, shining brightly. God Gene, the origin gene of the god race. Rare purple ability card, unawakened state. The race at the forefront of evolution among the creatures in the Marvel Universe was collectively known as the God Race. They had extremely excellent deified genes and had a lifespan of at least several thousand years. Their strength, willpower, physique, speed, and other physical qualities were among the best among all the alien creatures. They had divine power in their bodies, which could be used to strengthen their attacks, cast spells, and even enhance their artifacts to exert unimaginable power. After gradually awakening their origin power, each member of the god race mastered a different law of power, ranging from thunder, flame, ice, and death. Current state, available to draw, needs to be within 1 meter, continues to draw for 3 hours. And the rare purple prefix is unique, can only be drawn once. Warning, Kratos' divine power focuses on enhancing his physique. All this happened in the blink of an eye. Kale's long sword slashed at Kratos' neck with full force, and a few drops of blood seeped out of the skin. Since his attack failed, he had to retreat quickly. What a fast burst of speed. Also, you can actually hurt me. You are the first challenger in the past 6 months. Kratos grinned at Kale with a row of white teeth. His sandbag-sized fist was faintly glowing with golden-red divine power, and he punched toward Kale's chest in the air. Kale's expression changed drastically. He didn't have time to distance himself, so he could only hurriedly raise his shield and block in front of his body. As soon as he did this, Kale felt a terrifying force pouring on the shield, pressing his hands against his chest. He was thrown backward like a kite with a broken string. Bang! Kale flew backward for more than 30 meters, and his back hit the wall at the edge of the duel arena. The wall collapsed, creating a deep pit. Gravel and dust flew everywhere. In the audience seats, the alien audience collectively opened their mouths wide, and they were collectively speechless due to shock and astonishment. From the beginning of the match, Kale launched a sudden attack. Kratos' neck was hit by a sword and Kale flew backward. This series of battles had all happened in 1 second. A fight between gods. This was a real fight between gods. Should I say, as expected of the god race. After coughing a few times, bright red blood flowed out of the corner of Kale's mouth. He scrambled up from the pile of gravel. The metal shield on the ground next to him had a huge fist dent in the middle. It was cracked and obviously couldn't withstand a second punch. However, the battle has just begun. Chapter 189. Do you want to continue? Kratos calmly clenched his fists and walked forward step by step. His body seemed to be burning with a layer of faint divine flame. Even the audience outside the duel arena could feel a strong sense of oppression. Mr. Kale, Anna, and Bo covered their mouths and closed their eyes. They couldn't bear to watch the fierce fight that was about to happen. It wasn't that Kale was too weak, but that Kratos, who was guarding the arena, was too strong. He was so strong that it made people feel suffocated and desperate. Under the gaze of countless people, a small round of dazzling daytime light source suddenly bloomed in the dust that slightly covered Kale's figure in the duel arena. If one approached Kale now, they would definitely see that he was holding the last piece of krypton made by Howard in his left palm, which was also the core of the Iron Man armor. Iron Man armor transformation activate. Vice explained softly. From the small paralyzing nerve control device, the mechanical parts began to distort rapidly. The wires were inserted and attached to the chest of the metal mechanical armor, turning into a sunken mechanical slot. Kale raised his hand and pressed the krypton on Vice's deformed mechanical slot. Krypton and Vice were equivalent to the foundation and switch. When the two were pieced together, there was an immediate qualitative leap. The sizzling white electric light emitted from the mechanical slot and was transmitted to the metal armor, long sword, and even the cracked metal shield on the ground. These metal mechanical equipment were led by Vice. With enough Krypton energy, they were quickly pieced together and transformed into the Iron Man armor to cover the surface of the body. "Sorry to keep you waiting. The battle continues." A calm and indifferent voice sounded. In fact, it took less than 5 seconds for a silver Iron Man with the daytime light source on his chest to replace Kale on the duel arena. There was a huge gap between human and god in terms of individual strength that couldn't be easily crossed. Just like the contrast between blue and purple abilities, there was a gap of a whole grade that couldn't be filled in a short period of time. Kale understood this very well. He knew in advance that he was about to face an opponent of the same level as Thor. Since he chose to stay and fight, how could he not be prepared in advance? If he didn't have enough mutations, he could make up for it with equipment. The difference between a mortal and a god could be a set of Iron Man armor. In the rooftop room of the Galactic Stadium, Carnage couldn't sit still any longer. He stood up and protested loudly to the Grandmaster beside him. "Foul. This was absolutely against the rules. The champions actually brought high-tech weapons into the competition." "What? Didn't you choose the metal armor, sword, and shield from the armory 2 days ago and have someone send it over?" Modifying weapons is also one of the strengths of the challengers. Grandmaster smiled faintly and looked at the Iron Man below with great interest. "I thought it would end quickly. This way the competition will be much more interesting." "Interesting?" Kratos grinned. He didn't mind Kale's Iron Man armor. He squatted down slightly and sprinted. His tall and strong body rushed forward like a heavy cannonball. "Master, the material of this Iron Man armor still can't withstand the opponent's frontal attack." Vice started an analysis of the battle situation. "Of course I know." Kale looked at the leaping Kratos and took a deep breath. The jet engines under his feet and palms burst out scorching and dazzling energy tail flames. His speed, which was already 10 times faster than a human's, increased by a notch. "So, I still have to take the initiative to attack." He quickly dodged and flew to a low altitude. Kratos landed heavily on the ground in the next moment. The impact of the stomping of his feet and the elbow strike of his arms caused the hard floor within a 5-meter radius to crack and collapse with him as the center. Kale turned his hands and feet. The Iron Man's body drifted and turned back at a low altitude. He fell toward Kratos at a high speed. At the same time, he threw a straight punch with his right hand. A bunch of small engines protruded from the side of the arm of the Iron Man armor, spurting energy in the opposite direction to support the punch. Just in time. Kratos turned and looked up as if he had eyes on the back of his head. He threw his left fist upward as well. Iron Fist versus God Fist. The engines all over the Iron Man's body were spurting energy. Kratos stood still. In the stalemate, the floor under his feet cracked again like a spider web. The corners of Kale's mouth curled up. He quickly raised his other hand. Under Kratos' surprised gaze, the center of his metal palm glowed with the light of an engine, and a scorching laser beam burst out at close range. Bang! Kratos was immediately sent flying by the laser beam. The Iron Man's engine roared and exploded. He didn't want to let go of this opportunity to pursue the victory. Iron Man mode, the main means of attack is cannons. Kale's face was cold. He flew in the air and raised his metal palms like 2 cannon muzzles. He aimed simply and continuously shot out laser beams that cut through the sky. The aftermath of the energy explosion drowned Kratos' body densely. The spectators in the spectator stands were dumbfounded. In the past, the duel arena was basically a close combat between creatures. Only today was a unique and strange battle at the beginning. In the duel arena, the engines roared and lasers shot everywhere. The energy flames during the day covered the area where Kratos was. The billowing airwaves and dust filled the interior of the interstellar duel arena. Kale floated at a low altitude until half of the Krypton energy was consumed. The metal engines on his palms were red hot. Even the steel melted under the continuous laser beams. Only then did he stop the attack, panting slightly. "Vice, is the attack effective?" Kale looked at the smoke in front of him and asked solemnly. "Based on the test results. Be careful." Vice's voice sounded in a hurry. The next moment, an iron chain shot from the front and below at high speed and wrapped around Kale's left calf. "Oh no." Kale's face changed slightly. The engines on his feet exploded and he subconsciously wanted to fly higher. Clang clang. The buckle of the iron chain was tight. No matter how the Iron Man armor's engine vibrated, Kale couldn't move up 0.5 millimeter for a while, let alone break free from the damn iron chain. "Got you." On the ground below, Kratos' figure gradually appeared in the dispersed smoke. He grinned coldly and majestically. His appearance was disheveled and scorched, but it was limited to superficial wounds. His hand held the other end of the iron chain. "Come down." Kratos grabbed the iron chain with both hands and pulled it down forcefully. It spun quickly and dragged Kale 3 times like a windmill. Then it slammed straight to the ground. With pure strength far exceeding a ton, with just one violent swing of the iron chain, half of the silver-armored man's body sank into the ground. The krypton core on his chest dimmed slightly, and some parts of the Iron Man armor began to crack. The mechanical armor was only made of steel and had no buffering function. Most of the impact was borne by Kale inside. This was just the beginning. Chapter 190. Bang, bang, bang. In the battle, the chains clanged and the sound of the Iron Man armor hitting the ground continued. Kratos had completely transformed into a ruthless war god, smashing Kale to the ground again and again as if he was toying with his opponent with strength that was absolutely superior to that of humans. Wah! Bo crawled in Lee's arms, its tail raised in panic, not daring to watch anymore. The Iron Man armor was full of cracks and drops of blood seeped out from the cracks. The steel mask covering his face cracked in half, revealing Kale's bloodless face. Kratos swung the chain again, dragging Kale into the sky. At this moment, the metal arm lifted slightly, and the palm engine on the verge of being scrapped fired a laser beam, accurately bombarding the middle of the chain. The chain broke and Kale was able to break free and fly out. When he was free falling to the ground, energy waves splashed out from the soles of his feet in time, and he came to a stop and landed firmly on the ground. Master. Energy leakage, there is less than one layer left, and this deformed patchwork Iron Man armor is on the verge of collapse, and it can no longer carry out a high-load battle for a long time. Weiss responded with a little worry. Not just the armor, I can't take it anymore, Ba. Kale spat out a mouthful of bloody phlegm and looked coldly at Kratos in front of him. He pondered and said, I can't hide anymore, activate the Iron Man armor mode super kill. Yes. Weiss immediately understood what Kale meant. During the 2 days in the isolation room of the central building, Kale and Weiss collected information, built simple Iron Man armor, and continuously used data to conduct no less than thousands of combat simulations on the computer. There was only one way to defeat a high-level creature like the gods. And that was super kill. Whether I win or lose, it all depends on this move. Kale took a deep breath, shook his hand, and threw away the scrapped engine in the palm of the Iron Man armor. Seeing this, Kratos asked calmly, Why have you given up? Of course not. Kale smiled coldly, and a tide of energy suddenly erupted from his feet, leaving behind a series of white ripples as he charged forward. Aerial sprint. Is it this move again? I won't suffer the same loss a second time. Otherwise, I won't be worthy of the title of war god. Kratos had an idea. The moment he saw Kale's figure disappear, he quickly reacted by throwing a punch in front of him. The explosive speed of a mid-air dash could indeed be considered as extreme speed, but the biggest flaw was that it could only follow the original direction, rigidly moving in a straight line. Just as Kratos had predicted, Kale's figure flickered in a blur. Accompanied by a strong gust of wind, he appeared right in front of the punch. From a third person's perspective, it looked as if Kale had taken the initiative to hit Kratos' fist with his chest. The audience in the auditorium exclaimed, and Kratos also grinned. It's all over. The fist landed on the chest of Kale's Iron Man armor, on the glowing white krypton slot in the middle, which was Weiss's body. Under the absorption of kinetic energy buffer by the vibranium characteristic, the terrifying fist force still couldn't stop spreading and exploding. The Iron Man armor cracked all over and was about to collapse completely. Blood was coughed out along with shattered lung fragments, but Kale didn't even groan in pain. His feet touched the floor and he didn't retreat at all. His eyes shone with hope and perseverance. This is the moment. Kale ignored his own injuries and stretched out his hands like lightning. 2 small nerve paralysis devices were pressed on Kratos' shoulders. He yelled, Weiss. At the same time, Weiss had used radio waves to simulate the activation signal. The nerve paralysis device was activated, and white electric light shrouded Kratos, penetrating and paralyzing his internal body. One shot was enough to paralyze Thor temporarily and cause him to lose the ability to resist, not to mention 2 shots at the same time. Kratos' eyes widened, and his unshakable powerful divine body trembled. Finally he fell straight down facing Kale. Kale put his hands on Kratos' lower abdomen, and the engine under the Iron Man armor lit up and started. He suddenly flew up and pushed Kratos' body under him, soaring into the sky. In the blink of an eye, under the horrified gazes of countless spectators in the stadium, Kale carried Kratos' immobile body over the height of 100 meters in the interstellar stadium, past countless suspended spaceships, and rushed straight into the vast starry sky without any signs of stopping. Oh my god, crazy, really crazy. Yi sat down on the deck of a spaceship, her eyes dull. What does he want to do? Carnage stood up again and looked up in shock at Kale, who had turned into a bright star in the sky. On the side seat, the smile on the Grandmaster's face disappeared. He raised his head slightly, and his eyes were filled with shock and uncertainty. He felt that things had gone beyond his control. Directly above the duel arena, 1,000 meters in the sky, flames spurted from the feet of Kale's Iron Man armor. He pushed against Kratos, whose body was still twitching slightly, and flew faster and faster like a rocket, constantly rising at supersonic speed. Master, the energy of Krypton has been reduced to less than 5%. If this continues, you won't have enough energy to return to the ground safely, Vice warned. Kale heard this, smiled faintly and said with unprecedented certainty, "Don't think about landing. Turn on the engine to the maximum horsepower and keep going." Yes. Vice followed his order and turned the engine of the Iron Man armor to the maximum. Suddenly, the roar of machinery and energy burning resounded through the sky. 2,000 meters, 3,000 meters, 5,000 meters? This height is not enough. Keep going. Kale growled. Facing the cold night wind, he kept climbing. 6,000 meters, 7,000 meters, 9,000 meters. At this height, they were almost out of planet Sokka's atmosphere. The surroundings were full of colorful wormholes, and the space and air around were distorted. The flames stopped and the Iron Man armor completely froze at 0 degrees. Vice struggled to control the transformation, and the Iron Man armor collapsed into countless iron pieces attached to the ice, exposing Kale inside. Kale's eyebrows were covered with frost, and his breathing was difficult. He adjusted his posture slightly in the air, hugged Kratos' legs tightly with both hands, and aimed the big bald head downward. Then, the two of them became one and began to fall from a height of 9,000 meters. Kratos' body trembled, and his will began to gradually wake up, but it was too late. 8,000 meters, 6,000 meters, 4,000 meters, 2,000 meters, the falling speed was getting faster and faster. The wind pressure made Kale feel pain, but he stared at the galactic stadium that was getting bigger and bigger in front of him, and his eyes never moved. Master, it's too fast. If you fall like this, even with the enemy as a cushion, there's a high probability that you'll die on the spot. Vice turned into a headset and fixed it in Kale's ear, reminding him nervously. If I don't take the risk, how can I have a chance to defeat the creatures of the God Clan? Kale laughed boldly. Looking at the stadium and venue that were getting closer and closer, he closed his eyes. This is the real life of death. Chapter 191. In the Galactic Stadium's auditorium, the hundreds of thousands of extraterrestrial spectators, including the Grandmasters, all raised their heads in unison. They stared at the night sky in horror, where Kyle and Luli had completely disappeared. Everyone held their breaths, unwilling to miss a single detail of this epic ranked battle. The entire stadium suddenly fell silent. Then the black dot grew larger and larger, falling straight down toward the duel field without any signs of slowing down. They're here. They're here. Under the exclamations of the audience and their shocked gazes, Kale and Kratos, who had merged into one body, suddenly crashed into the center of the duel field like a blurry stream of light. Bang! Like a falling star, the cement ground caved in, and the super-strong impact wave of the fall sent all the gravel and dust within a radius of 10 meters flying. The interstellar stadium instantly fell silent. When the dust settled, it could be clearly seen that in the middle of the open and flat duel field, a bottomless pit with a diameter of 5 meters appeared. This extremely shocking scene made the scalps of countless creatures tingle, and their bodies and minds trembled slightly in horror. Oh my god, are there still any creatures that can survive? Probably, all of them are dead. Then what is this, a draw? The faces of the audience flushed, and they couldn't help but whisper to each other. No matter what, this was a battle that could be recorded in the history of Planet Sokka's duel field. Rustle, rustle, rustle. At this moment, a slight sound came from the deep pit. Under the bewildered gaze of the audience, a thick hand slowly reached out of the pit, placed on the edge of the pit and struggled to climb up. It was Demon King Kratos. But at this moment, his whole body could only be described with one word: miserable. His big bald head was covered in bright blood, which flowed down and disappeared into his deep eye sockets. His rough face looked ferocious and terrifying. His clothes were tattered, and his whole body was covered in gravel and dirt. He looked like a completely different person from the previous majestic god of war. What a crazy guy. Kratos crawled out of the pit with difficulty and stood on the edge dizzily. Looking down at the deep pit, he commented seriously, "Among the human race of inferior creatures, I would like to call you the strongest. However, it is clear that the battle between us has come to an end." Kratos shook his head slightly. Falling from a height of nearly 10,000 meters, if it weren't for the fact that he was a god with an outstanding physique and divine power protecting his body, he would have been smashed into a pile of meat paste no matter how advanced he was. This move was too crazy. It could no longer be simply called a move. Instead, it was a type of resolution. To kill 1,000 enemies at the cost of 800 of his own men, he was practically risking his life to execute it. Kratos turned around and opened his arms toward the audience. The loud cheers and shouts erupted. "Mr. Kyle is dead?" Baibo's mouth was wide open. He couldn't believe it. That should be the case. Enli nodded with a sorrowful expression. Just as she was about to say some comforting words, she suddenly saw something and her eyes widened in surprise. "Baibo, look. What is that?" Similarly, most of the audience's cheers stopped abruptly. They stared at the deep pit behind Kratos in astonishment. Kratos sensed their abnormality and turned around. In the next moment, even his pupils contracted. A hand slowly reached out from the deep pit. Black liquid constantly pulsed on the arm, covering it and transforming into a layer of smooth and tough keratin membrane. With the hand on the ground and a slight push, a tall figure jumped out and landed lightly on the other side of the deep pit. Its tall humanoid body was dark black in color. The outline of its muscles was extremely wild like an assembly line. Its long and narrow eyes were scarlet, and it grinned wickedly. It looked like a black demon that crawled out of hell. "Who are you?" Kratos frowned. Looking at the unknown creature in front of him, his body tensed up subconsciously. For the first time he felt a sense of danger. "I just blew up your bald head, and now you're asking me who I am?" The dark creature grinned and spread its hands. "But it makes sense. In this form, even your aura has changed. Let me formally introduce myself. I'm Tyrant Kale." In the rooftop room at the top of the arena, Grandmaster stood up and looked down at Kale, whose appearance had changed drastically. Then he looked at Carnage, whose face was pale. He asked in a low voice, "What's going on? Did something rush out from your body just now?" Carnage's face was extremely ugly. He was silent, and there were still fragments of the broken glass in his windbreaker pocket. He roared in his heart, "Venom, you still chose to return to him in the end. You betrayed me who was originally one with us." In the arena, Kale stretched his limbs. The long-awaited feeling of being completely covered by venom, and the feeling of being fully buffed surged into his heart. Just now, when he was about to fall from the sky, he really thought that he was going to die. However, the moment he flew past the rooftop of the Interstellar Stadium, a mass of black liquid suddenly bounced out and covered his body. He really didn't expect that the one who saved him in the end was Venom, and the one who betrayed him was another symbiotic derivative. Kale secretly sighed. After the symbiotic fusion with Venom, his consciousness and Venom's thoughts intertwined, and he instantly knew about Venom's split. After experiencing the World War II war with Venom for a long time, the negative emotions of slaughter, brutality, and ruthlessness had long been hidden in the depths of his body. Later, under the effect of the space or these wild and restless emotions split into a second symbiotic derivative. This was the origin of Carnage. Carnage could be said to be the joint creation of Kale and Venom's negative thoughts, so it was more powerful and had more subjective consciousness. Arriving on this planet half a year ago, Carnage and Venom were able to survive by constantly relying on the alien residents. But later there was a huge disagreement between the two. Venom wanted to find and wait for Kale, while Carnage wanted to be independent and become a new and powerful creature. In this divergence of ideas, the two finally completely fell apart. Carnage, who could fully control the host's body, was very powerful. He bound and trapped Venom, and the ambitious chief of guards was ready to replace Grandmaster's position one day. "I've wronged you." Kale smiled in relief. He could feel that Venom was more naive and pure than before, constantly conveying joy to him, just like the night when he first drew the Venom card. Speaking of cards, at this time the Venom symbiotic creature card was very different from before. Adult Venom symbiotic creature. A symbiotic creature that has grown to a certain extent. Purple creature card. Venom does not need to combine with the host and can survive alone. The symbiotic creature can greatly increase the host's strength and ability. Its weakness is ultrasound and high temperature. Now that it has reached adulthood, Venom's growth will be greatly reduced. Currently mastered abilities: quick learning, transmogrification, bullet immunity, liquid self-healing, memory detection, interception, gliding flight, dark claws, climbing walk, long whip, sharp blade, thousands of tentacles. Chapter 192. The adult Venom, with its current symbiotic fusion, may really be able to defeat the injured and weakened god creature. Kale thought to himself. He clenched his fists and could feel his strength increasing. Now, his pure strength was 13 times that of a human. Don't underestimate this increase of less than 1/3. Not only his strength but even his physique, speed, 5 senses and so on had been greatly improved. Moreover, Venom's bulletproof defensive coat and various forms of combat abilities just made up for the lack of a super soldier's physique in offense and defense. He had completely transformed into a combat creature that fought for the sake of battle without any worries. Although your appearance has become ferocious and terrifying, I have even torn apart large alien ancient monsters with my bare hands. How dare a mere human like you dream of being a match for a god? Kratos said in a dignified and deep voice, but his eyes became more and more profound and solemn. The faint brilliance of divine power permeated the surface of his body, and an overbearing pressure leaked outward. Kale was unmoved and grinned slightly. His scarlet eyes flashed with a cold light, and his body surged with a violent, evil, murderous, wild and fearless aura of battle intent. I don't care if you are a human or a god. I will still beat you. I will take your life while you are still alive. But the floor collapsed and shattered. Kale suddenly exploded, turning into a blurry black afterimage, and launched an extremely violent attack on Kratos. Kratos was still in a dizzy and injured state from falling from a high altitude, and Kale's state was at its peak after Venom's return, so there was no reason to wait for him to recover. Kratos quickly raised his head, and a bright saber light flashed by. It was Kyle's left arm that had completely transformed into a huge saber, and the handle was his shoulder. The sharp edge of the saber cut through the air and slashed down rapidly from top to bottom. Kratos crossed his arms in front of his body and blocked the slash of the blade. The blade only broke a little of his skin. But then Kale's eyes flashed fiercely, and he quickly stretched out his free right hand. It transformed into a tough black whip and shot out, wrapping around Kratos' neck. Kratos' face changed slightly and he wanted to reach out and pull the whip, but how could Kale give him time to fight back? Midair sprint, explode. Kale grinned sinisterly and activated air sprint. The energy tide under his feet exploded chaotically, and he, along with Kratos, who was bound by the long whip, once again shot up to a height of 30 meters. This is to repay you for what you did before. When he reached the highest point in the air, Kale pulled the long whip with both hands and abruptly swung it backward like a shoulder throw. Bang! Kratos was smashed hard onto the floor of the arena. His big bald head was injured again and the fall made him dizzy. Again? Kale seemed to be quite resentful of what had happened earlier. He glided down and dragged Kratos, who couldn't break free from the long whip in time, to the edge of the stadium. He climbed and stood upside down on the wall of the arena. He pulled and swung the long whip, lifting Kratos' body up and slamming him onto the floor again and again. Gravel flew everywhere, dust billowed, and the duel arena trembled slightly. Heavens! Is that still Mr. Kale? Only her brother and Bo were in the area near the front of the audience seats. Seeing this scene up close, they couldn't help but look at each other. Are you done yet? In the duel arena, Kratos suddenly let out an angry roar. His depression and anger were written all over his face. After another fall, he planted his feet firmly on the ground and pulled Kale, who was standing on the wall, backward. Kale reacted quickly. He quickly cancelled the long whip form in his left hand and glided at a low altitude with his wings, trying to quickly fly over Kratos' head. Kratos crouched and jumped up. He approached Kale with an astonishing leap and punched him, trying to send him flying. Claw form. Kale focused his eyes. 3 dark claws extended from his clenched left fist and collided with his opponent's fist, which was imbued with divine power. Crack. The dark claws shattered inch by inch from the tip to the end of the fist. As expected, it's still too difficult to take a punch from a Protoss head-on. Suffering a hidden loss, Kale sighed helplessly. He held his aching left arm and glided to avoid the follow-up attack. In the duel arena, Kratos was even more depressed. Kale, who was fully covered in venom, had many attack forms. Not to mention his movements were too agile. He could even fly for a short time while gliding. A Protoss without a divine artifact was like a bird with broken wings. While his strength was greatly reduced, he couldn't fly with divine power alone. I wonder where my divine artifact battle axe is. If my divine artifact is still here. Kratos gritted his teeth and fell back to the ground weakly. A while ago he still had some connection with the broken battle axe. Until a few days ago this connection was suddenly and completely cut off. Kratos didn't know that the axe was in Kale's card space and had become a private collector's item card. In the following battle, Kale didn't choose to fight Kratos head-on. Instead, he used his agility and dexterity to attack Kratos in many different forms. He tortured Kratos' godly power and spirit bit by bit as if he was hunting prey. Kratos wasn't afraid at all. His divine body was rough and thick with divine power. His physical resistance was off the charts. Even if Kale's strongest attack, the blade, slashed down, it would only cause superficial wounds. For a while, no one could do anything to the other. The battle between the two became an infinitely prolonged stalemate. But even so, the audience in the auditorium was still shocked. Their eyes never left the intense battle in the duel arena for even half a second. It's not a good idea to drag on like this. Kale had just leaped and glided to dodge Kratos' divine power punch when a thought flashed through his mind. Are there any other battle forms that you haven't used? Venom seemed to know what he was thinking and quickly gave him a hint in his mind. Right, there's still that new move. Kale took a deep breath and closed his eyes to adjust his state. With his wings suspended in the air at a height of 10 meters, he clenched his fists slightly nervously. The next moment all the strength in his body was drained. At the same time Venom's cuticle coat glowed with a dark light, as if it was preparing for something. What new tricks are you up to now? Kratos snorted coldly. He stomped on the floor and sprinted up like a cannonball, quickly approaching Kale in the air. Just as Kratos approached him, Kale suddenly opened his eyes. His scarlet pupils shone brightly as he looked ahead indifferently and calmly. Sorry, the outcome has been decided. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Tens of millions of sharp black tentacles that glowed with a dark luster suddenly shot outwards with his body as the center. Like the fireworks of death that bloomed in hell, they bloomed to the extreme in an instant. Chapter 193. Drip. The sharp black tentacles pierced into Kratos' chest and limbs. Although they didn't completely penetrate his divine body, more than half of the tentacles went deep into his bones. Bright red blood flowed down along several tentacles and quietly dripped onto the ground. The rest of the thousands of black tentacles that exploded in all directions without any blind spots shot downwards. The ground was easily pierced through like a piece of paper, forming a pitch-black pillar that stood upright. The tentacles that shot into the sky pierced through the floor of the rooftop room at the top of the Interstellar Stadium. The bodies of a few unlucky Grandmasters were completely pierced through. One of the tentacles stopped just below the Grandmaster's crotch. The tentacles that shot out in all directions just happened to reach where the audience was and stopped in front of the extraterrestrial audience. If they moved forward even half a meter, they would be able to kill hundreds of creatures. Kale opened his mouth wide in shock. Even he was a little stunned by the form and power of these thousands of tentacles. But he didn't have time to think. His body was almost drained of all strength and fatigue and weakness invaded his body. What was more serious was Venom. His gliding wings, dark hood and keratin membrane creature coat all melted like snow under the sun. They turned into countless sticky black liquid that flowed down from the surface of Kale's body like fresh blood. Now in the duel arena, the only one who was still in good condition was Vice. It quickly crawled behind Kale, fixed itself and transformed into a rocket backpack. It spouted some light blue tail flames, causing Kale to remain suspended in the air. Venom? Kale shouted. He waved his hand lightly and turned the falling black liquid, which was Venom's main body, into a card and sank back into the card space. Master, the sound wave detection detected guard spaceships surrounding this area, Vice reported back. Then let's use our last trump card. Kale's eyes dimmed. He looked weakly at the unconscious Kratos in front of him, who was fixed in midair by the tentacles. He gritted his teeth and said, "No matter what, we have to take this god out of here safely." At this moment in the rooftop room of the Interstellar Stadium, the Grandmaster was still in a state of shock. He kicked the black tentacle that was close to him and shattered it. His face was gloomy and silent. Those who were familiar with him knew very well that he was furious at this moment. Slaughter realized that the opportunity had come and walked forward to say in a deep voice, "Grandmaster, that man is not like the other challengers. It is too difficult to control him through means. Leaving him alive will only bring disaster to Sokka Planet sooner or later. I suggest that we take advantage of this opportunity to make him fall in this duel forever. Alright, I'll leave this matter to you as the leader. You're free to mobilize the guards of the entire planet. The guru nodded without hesitation and said with narrowed eyes, but I have a request. Save Devil King Kratos. Yes. A look of ecstasy appeared on Carnage's face. Looking at the chaotic situation in the arena, he decisively turned around and walked out of the room. Walking to the elevator, he took out his communicator and ordered, all the spaceships guarding around the arena, seal the arena. Send a few battle-type spaceships in and use their laser cannons to kill the challenger, the tyrant. Even if we have to flatten the arena, we won't hesitate. Regarding the matter of protecting Kratos, Carnage did not tell the guards even half a word. To him, everything that hindered him from killing Kale and Venom were burdens and burdens. Kale must die. The scene switched back to the galactic arena. Due to the terrifying impact of the tens of thousands of tentacles, the audience seats were in complete chaos at this moment. It was noisy and countless alien spectators fled outside in panic. The arena was like a giant beehive that had completely exploded under the final blow. In the arena where the tentacles were intertwined, Kale was using Vice help to pull Kratos' body down from the tentacle and carried him on his shoulder with difficulty. Just as he finished this step, the humming of several spaceships' engines in the open night sky above Kale's head reached his ears. Then, the bright and glaring laser cannons roared down and bombarded the black pillars of the remaining tentacles. Boom boom boom. The pillars exploded and the shockwave swept across. Countless black glass shards rained down from the sky. Seeing this scene, the alien spectators were even more terrified. They desperately tried to leave the arena, and many of the exits were crowded into mountains. Vice, if you don't hurry up, we're really going to be stuck here forever. Kale urged in a low voice. Carrying Kratos' dead body, he used the rocket launcher on his back to move around under the tentacles, using it as a cover to avoid the laser cannons that were shooting down. However, under the constant bombardment of the spaceships, the tentacles were decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. It looked like there was nowhere to hide. It's coming. Vice suddenly reminded. As if to prove its words, a fighter jet that was flying at extreme speed, like a stream of light, rushed into the galactic arena area. The laser cannons changed their tune and aimed at the two spaceships that were attacking Kale and fired 2 shots. Boom. The 2 spaceships were destroyed on the spot, emitting billowing flames and black smoke. They crashed into the arena, and the second explosion of the fuselage turned the spacious arena into a sea of fire. Whoosh. Propelled by the rocket launcher, Kale carried Kratos and quickly soared into the sky from the sea of fire. The fighter jet immediately opened the cabin door automatically to welcome them. After the two entered the cabin, before the door was even closed, the engine at the end of the fuselage roared and accelerated to escape outside the galactic arena. F***CK. Just as Slaughter walked out of the elevator, he looked up and saw this scene. His expression changed drastically and he shouted into the communication device in his hand, "They're trying to escape in the fighter jet. All spaceships chase after them. Don't worry, just destroy them together with the fighter jet." Understood. Countless spaceships that were waiting for orders near the arena started their engines and accelerated after receiving the order, chasing after Kale's fighter jet. Inside the Eagle fighter jet that was flying at high speed, Kale threw the severely injured and unconscious Kratos on the floor of the cabin, then he laid down on the metal floor beside him, panting heavily. The genetic disease took advantage of his weak body and forcefully took away the physical ability of the super soldier. Vice quickly transformed into a robot form and jumped into the pilot's seat. He inserted his hands into the pilot's socket, completely connecting himself with the fighter jet system, and used this to control everything in the fighter jet perfectly. Vice reported, "Master, there are almost 30 spaceships chasing after us from behind. Should we fight back, or which direction should we escape in?" "Don't worry about them, there are too many enemy spaceships. Once we're caught in the crossfire, we won't be able to escape." Kale panted heavily. He relied on his willpower to not fall into a coma, and he struggled to get up with his hands on his body. "Go around in circles with them, buy me as much time as possible." With a thought, all of Kratos' ability cards appeared in front of him, glowing brightly. Without even looking at the other ability cards, Kale's gaze fell directly on the rare purple ability card, Protoss Gene. Chapter 194. Today's Sokka planet had completely changed. The main entrance of the Galactic Stadium was like a huge mouth, constantly spitting out the densely packed alien audience. When they raised their heads, they would definitely be able to see the spectacular view of the main city's night sky. A fighter jet turned into a meteor and streaked across the sky, escaping into the wilderness outside the main city. Behind it, dozens of guard spaceships were in hot pursuit. The lights and engine flames illuminated the night sky as bright as day. Don't lose it. On one of the large guard spaceships in the middle and rear, Slaughter was sitting in the co-pilot seat. He looked at the fighter jet that was escaping at high speed and issued an order through the communication device. When it's within attack range, fire immediately. The guard spaceship at the front immediately aimed at the Eagle's tail and fired continuously. Dozens of laser beams formed a net and covered the area in front of it. It was as if the Eagle mech had eyes behind its tail. Faced with the concentrated laser cannon fire, it maintained its speed calmly. At the critical moment, it suddenly turned sideways and slid down. With a beautiful tail flick, it dodged all the laser beams. It even used this opportunity to increase the distance between them by 10 meters. At first, they thought it was just a coincidence. The guard spaceships continued to fire again. In a short moment, the night sky was lit up, forming a terrifying laser beam rain that covered the area in front of the Eagle. Whoosh whoosh, the Eagle's tail flame splashed. Through flipping, climbing, lowering, and sliding movements, it was so agile that it did not seem like it was made of metal machinery. It was a living steel eagle. The laser beams missed again, becoming a light screen that served as a foil to the fighter jet's flying posture. This was simply a large-scale live broadcast of piloting skills. The guards who were driving the spaceships were stunned. Could it be that the fighter pilot was a monster? The guard pilots did not know that the fighter jet was fully controlled by the Vice. The Vice was connected to the computer system, achieving the perfect control of human and machine. Even if the best spaceship pilot in the universe was here, he would still not be a match for this artificial intelligence mechanical creature. Are you addicted to shooting? Watch my counterattack. In the pilot seat of the fighter jet, the Vice whispered. A pair of mechanical arms that had turned into electrical plugs transmitted electricity. Its thoughts were calculated by the supercomputer system, controlling the fighter jet to quickly respond. Its master had only told it to avoid fighting and maintain a high speed to buy time, but it did not say that it should not fight back in the face of attack. At the bottom of the Eagle fighter's fuselage, two cannons protruded out and swiveled backwards, aiming at the group of spaceships behind it and opening fire. The next moment, the two small guard spaceships at the front were damaged, turning into 2 rounds of fireballs and crashing down, smashing into the garbage mountain in the wild and exploding. What kind of monster is the driver? You still have the energy to fight back when you're being chased by so many spaceships. The pilot of the spaceship was shocked. He no longer dared to mindlessly chase after them. In this way, their speed would inevitably decrease, and they could only allow the fighter jets to maintain a certain distance from them. A bunch of good-for-nothings. Carnage cursed in English. After thinking for a moment, he had an idea and ordered, "Tell the other spaceships that are still in the main city not to follow in this direction. Circle around in other directions and form an encirclement to slowly shrink." Time ticked by. At this moment, in the cockpit of the Eagle fighter, Kale was half lying on Kratos' body, in a state of semi-consciousness and semi-consciousness. His hands were tightly gripping Kratos' clothes. No matter how the fighter jet rolled or drifted in the air, he did not leave Kratos at all. The Protoss gene ability card was still being read, and the countdown was still ongoing. 10,000, 9999, 9998. The purple ability card required 3 hours to be drawn. This period of time was neither long nor short. In the face of an enemy attack, there was no doubt that it was a race against death. Vice relied on its perfect control of the Eagle fighter and really led the guard spaceships to circle around in the wild of Sokka. Under the continuous high speed and precise piloting, Vice's condition did not decrease. On the other hand, the guards who had been flying vigilantly for a long time were secretly complaining. If they chased, they could not catch up. If they did not chase, it was impossible. In this stalemate, time dragged on endlessly. More than 2 hours later, Vice still maintained a certain distance from the guard spaceships behind them, but soon, it suddenly detected signs of the presence of a group of spaceships in front of them. Vice was just about to adjust its flight direction and escape to the left or right, but after scanning with sound waves, it discovered that there were also large numbers of guard spaceships in the area on both sides. Master were completely surrounded. They sent the spaceships in the opposite direction and circled the planet, forming an encirclement. Vice sent out an emergency report, but Kale did not respond behind it. It could not help but look back in surprise. In the cockpit, Kale had already let go of Kratos' clothes and was lying unconscious on the floor alone. His eyebrows were furrowed and he was sweating profusely. His handsome face was filled with a painful expression. A faint divine glow appeared on the surface of his perfect human body, and it was as if there were golden flames burning fiercely on his body. Kale was completing the final transformation to become a god. If one could peek inside, they would definitely be able to see that the genetic structure in his body was originally a super soldier gene that was on the verge of collapse due to radiation. However, at this moment, there was a genetic sequence code that was hundreds of times more complicated. It forcefully invaded his body, destroying and wiping out the defective genetic faults in his body, and reconstructing a perfect genetic strip on its own. The extraordinary changes in the nature of the human body's genes, along with the body's bones, muscles, blood and hair, were all undergoing deification at the same time. As if it knew that this was a critical moment, Vice did not disturb Kale anymore. It sensed the guard spaceships that were surrounding them from all directions. It did not think too much and made the most suitable choice. The eagle suddenly lifted its head and shot into the sky like a rocket. It actually increased its altitude as if it was escaping from the planet. Haha, they won't be able to escape. Carnage laughed maniacally. He lifted the pilot's body with one hand and tossed him backward like a piece of cargo. He then sat on the main pilot's seat. He piloted the large spaceship and was the first to give chase. He chased after the fighter at full speed toward the outer space. On the dome of the pitch-black night sky, a small wormhole that was difficult to detect quietly opened. In the blink of an eye, it expanded into a huge dark red hole in the sky. The eagle and the large spaceship rushed straight up, and unfortunately, they were facing the center of the huge hole in the sky. A storm swept around the hole, forcing the guard spaceships that were surrounding it to retreat in a hubbub. At this moment in the cabin of the fighter, Kale's body left the ground and levitated. His silver hair had grown out to drape over his shoulders, and his body was glowing with a crystal-clear divine aura that was compatible with the universe. Chapter 195. I've become a god? Kale landed on the floor of the cabin from a suspended state. He calmly raised his hands and gently clenched his 5 fingers under the gaze of his golden eyes. The strength of his body did not need to be stored through his muscles. It was naturally condensed in his palms. He now had an illusion that if he punched with all his strength, he would blow a huge hole in the metal plate of the cabin. My strength is about 10 times stronger than before. Kale was secretly shocked. After the perfect human genes, super soldier, and the Protoss genes, god, fused, this was similar to a demigod, or super god. His strength alone increased by 10 times, which was a terrifying value of about 100 times that of a human. What did this mean? It meant that a superhuman grip of more than 10 tons could easily lift a bus and throw it 10 meters away like a sandbag. And strength was only one aspect. The comprehensive increase also included physical strength, speed, spirit, vitality, 5 senses, physical and energy resistance, and so on. Everything was at a superhuman level after deification. Wait, there's another wonderful feeling. Kale calmed down and could feel a mysterious power surging in his body. It was like blood flowing continuously through his body. This should be the power that the Protoss were born with, divine power. Kale was deep in thought. His eyes fell on his palms. He snapped his fingers slightly and a wisp of golden red flame appeared, swaying between his 2 fingers. Divine flame. This was the change in nature that he concretized when he operated divine power to the outside world. Since he had Protoss genes in his body, he instinctively possessed and freely mastered it. Kale suddenly realized that divine power was a bit like the human magical power developed by the Supreme Sorcerer Alpha Centauri. However, magical power needed to be suspended to open the door within the human body. It was a borrowed power that could only strengthen the spirit and soul. After reaching a certain level, it would indirectly affect the physical body. Divine power, on the other hand, was the innate power of the gods. It directly strengthened the spirit and physique of the creatures of the gods. With divine power they could survive in any harsh environment. With divine power they could control divine artifacts and hold the cosmic origin stone. It was as if he had opened a permanent door in his body, jumping out of the realm of ordinary creatures in the universe and completely stepping into the realm of gods. Now, even if Thanos had the Infinity Glove in his hand and gathered 6 cosmic origin stones, he would not be reduced to ashes by the laws of the universe with a snap of his fingers. Am I really a god now? Fire god? Kale stroked his smooth chin. Even he felt as if he was in a dream. The genetic disease that had plagued his body's lifespan had been completely eradicated, and his body had even broken through the shackles and evolved into a whole new realm. In the body of a human, he had transformed into a god. Back then he had no choice but to leave Earth and choose to step into the universe. Now he had finally obtained an unimaginably huge harvest. That was close. I almost died in the duel arena. Kale lowered his head and looked at the unconscious Kratos at his feet with lingering fear. It was only after he had attained a divine body that he realized just how powerful the god race was. Now, even if Kale stood where he was and did not need the protection of the venom coat, there would be no possibility of his life being threatened by a special forces soldier using various methods such as swords, spears, axes, biochemical poisons, firearms, and artillery shells. To the god race, humans were already as weak as ants. Wanting to seriously injure them was harder than ascending to the heavens. "Master, have you woken up?" Vice's shout from the main pilot's seat interrupted Kale's thoughts and pulled his consciousness back to reality. "Vice, you did well. You've done well. You've dragged it out for 3 hours." Kale praised. The fighter was obviously flying vertically at high speed. He used his climbing ability to stand upside down on the deck. "Master, our current situation is not optimistic. We are now in the eye of the wind of a large wormhole and can't escape. There is a large spaceship chasing after us and constantly bombarding the fighter with laser cannons in an attempt to destroy it." While Vice was reporting, the rear wing of the fighter was accidentally hit by a laser from below. The fuselage suddenly lost its balance and shook violently. Countless instruments flashed red warning lights. "Let's deal with the flies behind us first. Vice, open the rear cabin for me." Kyle kicked Kratos to a seat and quickly fastened his seat belt. Then he calmly turned around and walked toward the cabin at the back of the plane. Kale walked to the rear cabin. The entire deck of the rear cabin was sliding down, revealing the chaotic storm in the sky outside. About 20 meters below, there was a large spaceship chasing after them like a mad dog. "So it's you." Kale looked forward in high spirits. When he saw the person in the main pilot's seat of the large spaceship, he could not help but squint his eyes slightly. At the same time, Carnage, who was driving the large spaceship in pursuit, also saw Kale standing at the edge of the rear deck of the fighter. Kale? The former general manager's eyes turned scarlet. Dark red thread-like liquid surged from his endocrine system and turned into a layer of a huge muscular creature shell on the surface of his body. Soon he completely transformed into a huge humanoid monster due to his anger. He was far taller and stronger than when he was fully covered in Venom's body. "You must die here," Carnage roared hoarsely. He quickly operated the pilot's instrument and adjusted the laser cannon at the front of the large spaceship, aiming at the rear cabin of the fighter where Kale was. Kale's face was calm. He just stood there without moving, looking indifferently at Carnage in the main pilot's seat. Die. Carnage's heart was filled with fear. His face twisted crazily. He pressed the button to fire the cannon. Milky white energy condensed at the muzzle of the cannon. Then a blue-white laser beam shot out, heading straight for Kale. The laser beam arrived at a distance of 20 meters in an instant. It seemed impossible to dodge, but in Kale's golden eyes, the laser beam was constantly slowing down. It looked like a high-speed baseball. Although it was still very fast, it was not impossible to see its trajectory. At the critical moment, Kale raised his left hand. Golden red flames burned on his palm. He aimed at the laser beam that was about to land in front of him and slapped it. Bang! The laser beam turned abruptly and deviated 45 degrees to the left. It brushed past the tail of the fighter and disappeared. Carnage saw this scene and couldn't help but open his mouth wide. His heart was filled with fear again. He blocked the laser with his bare hands? Damn it, he has become stronger again. He was about to control the spaceship's laser cannon to fire again. But when he looked up, he was shocked to see Kale's left arm burning with flames. He raised his palm and pointed it forward. "Carnage, you are the evil product of Venom and me. The negative consciousness accumulated during World War II on Earth. You are my former comrade and also my inner demon." Kale looked at Carnage calmly and said softly as if he was saying goodbye, "But World War II on Earth ended long ago. Everything is either frozen or has disappeared from this world forever. So, farewell, Carnage. I hope that in the next life, you will not have anything to do with me." After Kyle finished speaking, his left palm, which was already completely filled with dazzling, scorching flames, gently pressed down in front of him. His 5 fingers slightly curled and twisted. A pillar of flame shot out. Wherever it passed, even the air was scorched and distorted. It was like a burning dragon that went straight for the cockpit of the large spaceship. No, no. Carnage's eyes widened in horror as he looked at the raging flames coming at him. He let out a shrill cry. The tall and strong monster's body was like a snowman. It began to melt under the sun. Bang! The flames melted the windshield's tempered glass and poured into the cockpit of the large spaceship. Carnage only struggled for a moment before his figure disappeared inch by inch. The large spaceship turned into a fireball. It fell straight down with flames and black smoke. Chapter 196. With his own hands, Kale's face was calm, but he could not help but sigh in his heart. Carnage was a split body that Venom learned from his evil thoughts. Unlike Venom, who was a creature from a card, Carnage was not under the control of the creature card code. If Carnage had unilaterally chosen to hide and escape at the beginning of the battle and not be his enemy, how would things end up like this today? Kale turned around and returned to the cockpit of the fighter. Vice's mechanical hands were still plugged into the pilot's instrument. Looking out of the fighter's windshield, he could see that a hole had appeared in the sky. Red lightning flashed in the giant hole as the hole spun and condensed into a frenzied storm that swept across the surroundings. The fighter was right in the center of the hole in the sky, in the middle of the frenzied storm. Vice knew that Kale had dealt with the trouble at the back and reported, "Master, it's obvious that the fighter can no longer break through the wormhole." "Then let's speed up and enter the wormhole. Since we have achieved our goal, there's no point in staying on planet Sokka any longer," Kale said calmly. He did not have the slightest bit of nostalgia for planet Sokka. Although there were still some items such as the hanging ring vibranium arm guards, and energy guns that had not been found yet. The high-tech items that he had entrusted Only to purchase had not all arrived. However, all of that was no longer important. Nothing could compare to the benefits of the Protoss gene. If there's a chance in the future, I'll come here again to settle the score with the Grandmaster. It's also time to plan my return to Earth. Kale was looking forward to it. He had not been on planet Sokka for long, and his farewell to family Cal felt like it was just yesterday. But going back and forth in the wormhole would take a lot of time. If he could return to Earth smoothly, he did not know how many years would have passed. But it did not matter how many years had passed. After all, family Cal had the infinite equation and he was already a member of the Protoss. With the life enhancement card in hand, 10 or 100 years really did not matter. Sitting in the co-pilot seat, Kale was fastening his seatbelt. Vice reminded him, "Please sit tight." Vice then controlled the fighter to aim at the center of the wormhole in the sky. The engine at the back roared as the fighter rushed forward at maximum speed. Crash. Inside the wormhole, bits and pieces of alien trash kept falling down, smashing into the front of the fighter, causing the body of the fighter to tremble slightly. "Since I don't have the exact location of Earth, I can only pilot the fighter to perform a flight jump and ensure that we can safely pass through the unstable wormhole at the fastest speed. It has been going on for so long and the energy fuel is almost used up. Hopefully, the random exit will lead us to a civilized planet." Kale's heart skipped a beat when he heard Vice reply. He had a bad feeling about this. The fighter jet turned into a stream of light and crashed into the dark red thunderstorm wormhole. The subtle space-time distortion filled every corner of the cabin. "It's starting," Vice said in a low voice. The fighter suddenly shook violently. Kale looked out of the windshield. Countless stars and planets were blurry, and the universe was in chaos. Jump, jump, jump. The fighter continued to fly and jump until the energy fuel meter's deviation fell close to zero. It was as if it had finally left the space-time wormhole. The front of the fighter suddenly opened up, revealing a vast expanse of reddish-brown wilderness. Ka-ka-ka. The fighter jet had already stopped and decelerated, but it still lost control and crashed into the wilderness at high speed. It turned into a bulldozer, leaving a 50-meter-long plow mark on the ground. In the end, it slammed into a small stone mountain at a tilt before it finally stopped. "Vice, where is this?" Kale stood up from the co-pilot seat and looked out of the windshield. What he saw was a desolate planet. "This is..." Vice pulled out his mechanical arm and looked at the information on the projection screen. He replied, "It's a universe area not in the database. It should be a planet in the human civilization star sector and a mysterious unknown area." "What kind of explanation is that?" Kale twitched his lips helplessly. He turned around and saw a pair of eyes staring at him from behind. The two were silent, and their eyes met for a brief moment. "You're awake?" Kale smiled faintly and looked at Kratos, who was half lying in the seat. After all, he was the fire god now, and there was no reason for him to be afraid of the severely injured and weak god of war. Vice quickly jumped onto Kale's shoulder and hid behind his head. Even though he was a mechanical life, the thrilling battle in the dual field still made him, even the system program, wary of Kratos. I didn't expect that I would be defeated by a human in the end. Kratos grinned with difficulty and looked at Kale calmly. He asked, "Why didn't you give me a quick death?" "Because you were useful to me before. But now it's up to you whether you're useful or not." Kale stepped forward and looked down at Kratos with his golden eyes. He said indifferently and majestically, "Surrender or die. You only have these two choices." As he spoke, a faint golden divine flame rose from his body. Divine power was the most obvious racial symbol of the Protoss. "You're a god too." Kratos was shocked and his eyes widened. He looked at Kale, whose aura was completely different from before, in disbelief. He quickly shook his head and said, "No, it's impossible. You were definitely not a Protoss before." "Forget it, it doesn't matter if you're a Protoss or not." Under Kyle's vague threat, Kratos grinned. His eyes were filled with determination, and he said with determination and dominance, "I'm the god of war. Although I've been defeated, my godly weapon destroyed, and I'm suffering from an old illness, I'm still the brave and invincible god of war. How can I surrender to someone else?" "Okay, I already know the answer." Kale nodded and didn't intend to waste time persuading him. He was just giving it a try and didn't expect too much from it. It was great to have a god of war as a subordinate. But if the god of war chose to surrender, would he still be a god of war? "I'll give you a quick death," Kale said calmly. He raised his left hand and put his index and middle fingers together. Golden divine flames burned fiercely, and the temperature in the battleship rose by dozens of degrees in an instant. "Do it. Also, I know this planet you've come to, so there's no harm in telling you. This is the ancient battlefield between that old guy Odin's god realm and a powerful race." After Kratos finished speaking, he simply closed his eyes and calmly waited for death. In fact, his body was no longer as strong as it used to be when he was in the duel arena. Just like Kale before, he was caught in a fatal illness caused by an old illness from war. The difference was that Kratos could only walk toward death like a god of war, while Kale could go one step further. "I want to know who defeated you when you were at your peak as a god of war, destroyed your godly weapon, and exiled you to planet Sokka?" Kale asked. "You only need to know one thing. When they appear in front of you, you'll know everything," Kratos said vaguely without opening his eyes, and then fell silent, unwilling to say more. "Then goodbye, god of war," Kale said softly and poked Kratos between his eyebrows with 2 fingers. The flames condensed at his fingertips broke through the surface temperature of the sun to 5,000 degrees Celsius. Combined with a strength 100 times that of a human, the flames penetrated the forehead and skull of the god of war. The flames raged and swallowed inwards, preserving Kratos' body but destroying everything inside the skull. Chapter 197. Kratos' vital signs disappeared, and he lay on the seat of the fighter with his eyes closed forever. There was only a 2-finger-sized burn hole between his eyebrows, and no blood flowed out. Everything had been directly evaporated into nothingness by the perfectly controlled flame. The god of war of a generation had died. After completing the act of killing a god, Kale calmly retracted his 2 fingers and waved gently. The golden flame dissipated from his fingertips, and a few wisps of green smoke slowly dissipated in the cabin. After attaining the divine body, he also realized that Kratos was indeed terminally ill, like a god past his prime. Otherwise, how could he have been seriously injured by the thousands of tentacles with his physique that was 100 times stronger than a human's, coupled with his divine power that was inclined to protect and enhance his strength? Of course, the power of the thousands of tentacles was also undeniably powerful. It consumed all of Kale's physical strength, and also caused Venom to fall into a deep coma. The side effects were huge and it could only be used as a trump card to cut off all means of retreat. It couldn't be used in normal mode. "Master, can I handle Kratos' body?" Vice jumped onto Kratos' knee and asked. "What do you want to do with it?" Kale asked in surprise. "The body of a Protoss creature is the best experimental subject. We can try to understand the secret of the source of power in the Protoss bloodline, or transform him into a half-mechanical artificial god." Vice's mechanical eyes kept turning, emitting red laser light, and scanned Kratos' body from top to bottom. It was a mechanical creature born from the semi-intelligent Jarvis, and its system program seemed to be infiltrated with Howard's craziness for scientific research, and it had a great interest in everything that was worth studying. "There's no problem with the research, but the transformation into a man-made divine weapon will be put aside for the time being," Kale nodded and said. He still had a certain amount of respect for Kratos, which was a treatment that none of his dead enemies had received before. Kratos was the most difficult opponent that Kale had ever encountered. Kratos knew the secret of him transforming into a god after the battle, and they had a clear stance in the duel. Rather than keeping a war god who couldn't offer his loyalty and was hard to control, it was better to kill him and end all troubles. After Vice preserved Kratos' body in the warplane's freezer, she left the cabin with Kale and arrived at a desolate land outside. The energy and fuel of the Eagle had been completely depleted. In addition, many parts of the body had been damaged due to the emergency landing. It was obvious that it had completely lost the ability to continue interstellar travel. Kale immediately drew his card and converted the Eagle into a card, keeping it in the card space. He stood on the small hill and looked around. What entered his eyes was a dead silent wilderness without any signs of life. There were no trees or grass, only brown gravel and dust. It was even more lifeless than the deserts on Earth. The gravity is 2 times that of Earth. The oxygen content in the atmosphere is scarce, and the elemental energies are chaotic. This is not a planet suitable for life, Vice replied softly. Kale nodded in agreement. However, he didn't wear any protective equipment such as a spacesuit. He only changed into casual clothes from Earth, which consisted of a leather wallet and jeans. He didn't look uncomfortable at all. The Protoss could survive in any cruel environment. Even in the vacuum of the universe, they could still rely on their divine power to survive safely. It could be said that the Protoss were not the strongest creatures in the universe, but they were definitely one of the most evolved races in the world. 2 antennas stood up on Vice's head, and a string of garbled codes flashed through its mechanical eyes. Suddenly, it told Kale a piece of information that surprised him. Master, radio waves detected the existence of 2 creatures about 10 kilometers away from here on the left. Creatures on a non-life planet? Kale touched his chin and picked up Vice from the ground. He jumped down the small hill and landed on the flat ground, waving his hand in front of him. An item card was quickly pulled out and landed on the ground in front of him. It was a retro twin-engine motorcycle. It had a rough and domineering appearance, and the curvature of the metal body was very beautiful. It was also created and modified by Howard. It was built by him and Captain America during the battle against Hydra. However, Steve's motorcycle had self-destructed during the attack on Hydra's base. Kale had kept it in the card space until now. Kale straddled the motorcycle and inserted the key to start it. Vice transformed into a pair of mechanical sunglasses and rested on the bridge of his nose. The inside of the glasses reflected the navigation route directly to the destination of the creatures 10 kilometers away. Kale twisted his wrist quickly and added a few hands of gas. The rear tire of the motorcycle immediately rotated, and the engine roared to life. A burst of sand and gravel splashed behind him. The motorcycle was like a wild horse that had escaped its reins. It sped up into the wilderness ahead. After drifting, it adjusted its direction and sped away. On a desolate planet without any signs of life, the surface was dry and dark brown, and the hills were lonely like tombs. Boom, boom, boom. The high-speed motorcycle suddenly broke the silence and swept across the boundless wilderness, stirring up clouds of sand and dust. Gotcha. Kale frowned slightly as the wheels of the motorcycle crushed something light under it. On the ground further ahead, the dust covered the bones of various unknown creatures. Some of them were huge monster skeletons, some were 5-meter-tall human skeletons, and some were deformed creatures that were less than half the size of a human. Most of these bones were buried under the sand and gravel on the ground, and only the tip of the iceberg was exposed. There was no telling how many more were buried underground. It was as if the blood of the creatures had been irrigated over the years, and even the original brown soil had turned into an eternal dark red. Kratos was right. This is an ancient battlefield where the higher races fought for sovereignty over the universe, Kale sighed softly. Only a large-scale war between races in the universe could turn an entire planet into a battlefield, and blood would flow for thousands of miles. Now, who was the higher race that ruled this universe? The answer was obvious. It was the deities of Asgard in the heavenly realm. Asgard. Kale was thinking to himself when the light on the inside of Vice's sunglasses floated in front of his eyes, reminding him that he was approaching the location where the sound waves had detected the creatures. We've arrived at the location, but just 10 seconds ago, the signs of life of the 2 creatures disappeared at the same time, Vice reminded him. Kale nodded to show that he understood and continued to drive the motorcycle forward. Soon he stopped in front of the bodies of the 2 creatures that were hugging each other. He pushed his sunglasses up his forehead in surprise. One of the bodies was a humanoid soldier in silver armor with a long sword in his hand. His blood-stained face was filled with determination and determination. The other body was a three-headed monster that was 2 to 3 times bigger. Its twisted facial features were extremely ugly, and it was holding a trident in its thick hand. Chapter 198. I'm a step too late. Looking at the 2 bodies of the alien creatures nearby, Kale shrugged helplessly. Soon, he seemed to have noticed something and his eyes unexpectedly fell on the body of the silver-armored soldier. With a thought, a few item cards quickly appeared and the detailed information of the cards appeared in front of him. Wuru Longsword. A long sword with very little Wuru metal. Blue item card. Wuru is a metal unique to the Divine Dominion. It is hard, malleable and highly compatible with divine power. This one-handed longsword is mainly made of silver with very little Wuru metal. The blade is extremely sharp. It can be attached with divine power to greatly increase the ability to kill enemies. Current status, can be drawn. Wuru armor. Armor with very little Wuru metal. Blue item card. The whole set of armor is mainly made of silver and very little Wuru metal. It is comfortable and sturdy. After being attached with divine power to activate, it can obtain a certain degree of physical and elemental resistance. Current status, can be drawn. Wuru metal from the Divine Dominion. Kale muttered to himself and stretched out his left hand. After 3 seconds of reading time, the silver long sword in the belly of the ugly monster instantly disappeared. At the same time, an item card quietly appeared in his hand. The image of the long sword and information was printed on the front. Vice was already used to this. He still kept his sunglasses on Kale's forehead and sent out radio waves to the surrounding wilderness to search for anything suspicious. Kale's movements did not stop. He summoned the card in his hand and the long sword appeared again in his left hand out of thin air. Throughout the entire process he did not even take half a step away from the motorcycle. It looked like he was casting a spell to retrieve items from a distance. Kale simply operated his divine power. The blazing flames immediately spread from his arm to the hilt and the body of the long sword. However, under the envelopment of the divine flame that was close to 1,000 degrees Celsius, not only did the silver longsword not show any signs of melting, but the dirt and blood on it had all evaporated. The body of the longsword became more and more transparent. The flames formed by the divine power naturally attached to the Wuru longsword. The two perfectly matched together as if there was some kind of chemical reaction. The originally ordinary-looking silver sword turned into a dazzling flaming laser sword. Master, is this a divine artifact? Even Vice could not help but be amazed by this magical scene. He was unable to analyze the data in his system and come up with the relevant scientific evidence and conclusions. No, this is just a weapon with a little bit of black metal mixed in. It's still far from being a divine artifact. Kyle shook his head gently and dispersed his divine power. Looking at the long sword in his hand, he sighed with emotion. Just a little bit of the black road that was compatible with divine power was enough to make the silver sword break away from the ordinary grade and enter the ranks of blue-grade items. Compared to Earth's vibranium and sodium carbon steel, this Wulu metal was definitely more precious. However, the weapons made by Wuru could only be used by creatures with godly power. Of course, this was not what Kale was most concerned about. Vice, we need to expand our search area. We must find living extraterrestrial life forms. Kale's eyes flashed as he said in a deep voice. The weapons and equipment forged by Wu Lu were naturally the standard equipment of God's domain soldiers. And with Divine Realm soldiers appearing on this ancient battlefield, it proved that this planet still had a close connection with the Divine Realm. Understood. I will maintain the transmission of radio waves and search for all life forms within 10 kilometers. I will also search for scientific instruments that have their own signals. Vice said. Kale nodded and started the motorcycle. After kicking up a cloud of dust, he continued to drive forward at high speed. It seemed like they were driving aimlessly in the wilderness. In fact, Kale and Vice were working together to search for any signs of suspicious life forms. Half an hour later, Kale drove the motorcycle and quickly passed by another white bone wilderness. Just as he was feeling depressed from the lack of results, a green light prompt appeared on the inside of his sunglasses. Vice's report was then heard. Master, I have detected an abnormality in a place. What abnormality? I hope it's useful information. Kale asked quickly. Vice replied, I'm not sure about the exact situation. The radio waves I sent out were very close to that place. It seems to have been affected by some strong electromagnetic interference. The electrical source is close to the surface and fluctuates between high and low. It's very unstable. I don't think it's caused by natural lightning. Guide me there. Kale did not hesitate and gave the order decisively. After receiving the route from Vice, he stomped on the ground with his left foot. The motorcycle that was traveling at high speed was lifted up high. It did a beautiful drift in the air and quickly adjusted the front of the motorcycle. As soon as it landed on the ground, it sped toward the left without slowing down. Now that he was at least a divine realm creature, he did not need to be as cautious as he used to be when he faced any situation in outer space. In just a short while, Kale drove the motorcycle and approached the area that Vice had guided him to. Before he reached the center of the electrical source, he sharply sensed that there was a fierce aura in the air. Boom! The thunderclouds in the sky were gloomy and unpredictable. From time to time, thunder would strike. Amidst the dense thunder, there was a faint roar of a wild beast. Kale slowed down the motorcycle and sped up a small hill. When he reached the top, he braked and stopped. He kept the motorcycle in the card space and lowered his body to hide. He looked down and saw a golden-haired young man and a creature as large as a small mountain on a plain 50 meters away from the hillside. Their bodies were completely disproportionate in size as they confronted each other. The golden-haired young man's face was rough and bold. His appearance was similar to a human's. He wore a metal helmet that resembled two horns on his head. His tall and strong body was covered in silver armor and a red cape that fluttered in the wind. The thunder in the sky struck the young man's body. Flashing blue lightning intertwined outside the armor and served as a foil to his strong body. He looked like the immortal and invincible Thor. It was not that he looked like him. He was definitely Thor. Bang! The golden-haired young man held a small hammer in his hand and spun it like a windmill. As he swung the hammer forward, it lifted his body off the ground and flew into the sky. He rushed to the front of the huge creature, surrounded by thunder and lightning, and swung his hammer down with the force of 10,000 pounds, smashing it on the head of the truck-sized monster. The huge monster howled and fell to the ground. Thor, Thor? Kale blinked and looked at the familiar figure. This time he was really shocked. These days, the Protoss were everywhere? He had just killed one and now another one appeared. And it was Thor, Thor. The role of this hammer was no less than his comrade Captain America. In the final battle against Thanos in the future, he who had awakened as the King of Gods, was the only main character who could defeat Thanos with the Infinity Glove. Vice, I think I've found a way to return to Earth. Kale pondered for a moment and suddenly said with a smile. How did he get out of Earth? The teleportation ability of the Dimensional Stone. In an instant, he crossed millions of planets from Earth to planet Sokka on the other side of the universe. Although the Dimensional Stone was lost when he was traveling through the universe, in the world of Marvel, teleportation was not the exclusive function of the Dimensional Stone. For example, the Rainbow Bridge used by the Divine Realm's Immortal Palace. How can I borrow Thor's Rainbow Bridge? Kale narrowed his eyes and hid on the side of the hillside. He looked at Thor, who was holding a hammer and surrounded by thunder and lightning. He began to think of his own abacus and plan. In the fierce battle in the wilderness. Chapter 199. The alien creature that Thor was fighting with Thor looked like a lizard that had been enlarged 100 times. It was nearly 8 meters tall and 30 meters long. It had 3 pairs of black wings on its back that could block out the sun. Its entire body was covered in tough and thick black scales and lumps. When it stood on all fours on the ground, it looked like a steel fortress that stretched across the plains. It looked a bit like the evil black dragon that was recorded and described in Western myths on Earth. However, it was much uglier than what was described in the myths. After taking a full blow from Thor's hammer, a small area of the scales on the black dragon's head shattered, forming a hammer-shaped crater. There were still electric sparks left on the surface of the black dragon's head. Smelly black blood gushed out from the wound and dripped onto the ground. However, with its huge body, this injury could only be considered a superficial wound. The black dragon's dark red eyes widened in anger. Its bright red pupils reflected Thor's figure in front of it. Suddenly, it raised its head and roared at the sky. Roar? The dragon's roar shook the wilderness, forming a physical sound wave attack. Air waves and dust exploded outwards. Even Kale, who was 50 meters away, felt pain in his eardrums. He couldn't help but cover his ears. If it was any other god, they might have taken the initiative to retreat. Unfortunately, the alien creature that looked like a black dragon was facing Thor. Thor was a rough man with tough nicknames like Mangzi and Hammer God. Come on. I'm not afraid of you. Thor shouted provocatively at the black dragon. He swung the Thor's hammer in his hand and turned into a flash of blue lightning. He took the initiative to attack the black dragon creature that was dozens of times larger than himself. The black dragon was one of the overlords of this planet. How could it tolerate the provocation of an outsider? It roared and flapped its wings furiously. Its huge body quickly rose into the air and engaged in close combat with Thor. The battle between a god and an ancient creature had just begun. Hiding behind the hillside, Kale suddenly took out a bag of sunflower seeds. He ate them while patiently observing the battle. Now was not the right time. When it came to borrowing Asgard's Bifrost, the simplest and most direct way was to make friends with the son of Odin, Thor. So the question was, how could he make friends with God in a short time? Kale thought for a while and quickly came up with a cliché idea. The hero saves the damsel in distress. This trick was not only useful for women but also for men. He had tried to trick Steve on the spot and succeeded. As the saying goes, since ancient times, deep feelings were unreliable, and only tricks could win people's hearts. When Thor is about to die, I'll step in and make him owe me a favor. Kale thought to himself, his gaze never leaving the intense battle in front of him. The electromagnetic field raged violently, and sand and gravel flew everywhere. A storm formed within a 50-meter radius of the battlefield. Any ordinary creature that entered this area would be pierced by the gravel or the flowing electricity. Thor and the primordial black dragon could be considered as powerful creatures in the entire universe. The battle between the two of them was several times more tragic than what he had seen in the Saka arena. Boom! The black dragon's body was covered in blood. The more serious the injury, the crazier and wilder it became. It twisted its body fiercely in the air, and with a swing of its tail, it sent Thor flying away like a fly. The helmet shattered, and Saul flew out with a painful groan. He was thrown 50 meters away like a meteor, and his speed didn't decrease at all as he crashed into the front of the hill where Kyle was. The gravel collapsed and sank into the mountain. Kale used his stealth skill just in case. He turned into a black mist and disappeared from the spot. In less than half a second, Thor rushed out of the mountain as if nothing had happened. His long blonde hair fluttered behind him in a domineering manner. He relied on the Thor's hammer in his hand to fly at supersonic speed and kept approaching the black dragon. In the air, he held the Thor's hammer high in his right hand like a lightning rod. The thunder in the sky roared and struck the Thor's hammer. It was transmitted to the armor and the body to increase the power. Thor's eyes were sharp. He arrived at the black dragon that was hovering at a low altitude and swung the Thor's hammer from above. The thunder pierced through the black dragon's wings and burned them. Black blood splashed like rain. The black dragon howled in pain and its huge body fell onto the ground. The ground shook slightly. Thor was panting heavily. He swung the Thor's hammer again and again, leaving big and small wounds on the black dragon's body. This alien monster isn't strong enough. Seeing that Thor had the upper hand, Kale threw away the sunflower seeds in his hand. He frowned and fell into deep thought. If this continued, Thor would kill the black dragon alone. There would be no room for him to fight. In fact, it was not that the black dragon was weak. It was just that Thor was too strong. As the son of the Odin god king, Thor has the best and purest genes and bloodline of the Protoss. The embodiment of his divine power is the thunder and lightning that represents destruction. Coupled with the artifact Thor's hammer and the natural thunder and lightning, now, even if Kale were to face Thor, the result would not be much better than the black dragon. This is not the way to go. Kale thought for a moment. Suddenly he had an idea. He pulled out a creature card. With the summon, a black liquid appeared on his palm. Venom, have you recovered? Kale asked. His fingers rubbed Venom's soft body. Venom did not respond to his cries and kneading. It was like a slime sleeping quietly. Master, his life signs are too weak. It should be too exhausted in the battle and the duel and will not wake up for a while. Even if it wakes up, it will take some time to recuperate and recover. Vice whispered back. Kale looked at Venom on his right hand and hesitated. He pulled out another item card with his left hand. The card turned into a green bean between his two fingers. You got lucky. Kale felt a little heartache. He broke the senza bean into two and stuffed half of it directly into Venom's body. The next moment, the senza bean's function immediately took effect. Venom's body squirmed linearly and touched Kale's arm with countless black tentacles, conveying joy and happiness to him. Kale breathed a sigh of relief. He glanced at it and ordered, "Now there is something you need to do immediately." 3 seconds later. On the hillside where Kale was, a shallow black shadow slid on the ground and sneaked into the battle without anyone noticing. in the battle that was about to end. The black dragon creature lay on the ground and struggled weakly. Thor stood on its head, gasping for breath and raising the blood-stained Thor's hammer in his hand. It's over. Thor swung the hammer vigorously and was about to give the black dragon a final blow. But at this moment, the black dragon suddenly opened its eyes and stood up as if it had been injected with chicken blood. It threw Thor off its head. This is... Thor held Thor's hammer and stopped his body in the air. In his shocked and puzzled eyes, the black dragon below twitched and trembled. A layer of dark biological armor emerged on the scarred dragon body, forming a double surface protection with the scales. The already sharp claws and fangs were now more than 3 meters long, shining with a cold black light. As if it had received an evolution buff, the black dragon beast's eyes glowed with a scarlet light. Its decadent and exhausted weak breath rose steadily and soon surpassed the original fixed peak of adulthood. It let out a deafening dragon roar towards Thor in the air. Chapter 200. What the hell is going on? Thor was dumbfounded. His eyes were wide open as he cursed in his heart. He had fought a tough battle to his heart's content, and his energy was almost depleted. He was prepared to deal the final blow so that he could return to the divine territory to take a bath and rest. But the ancient creature he was fighting had not only recovered to full health, but had also become stronger? It had not changed for thousands of years, and now it had suddenly evolved? Are you kidding me? Thor did not have time to think. The black dragon had already flapped its 2 remaining wings, and in a sandstorm, its huge dragon body charged at him rapidly. It opened its bloody mouth and bit at him with its fangs. This bastard. Thor's expression changed drastically. He threw Thor's hammer forward with all his might. The hammer hit the black dragon's jaw hard, causing the mouth to close. However, the black dragon was still charging forward at high speed. Thor's palms pressed against the black dragon's jaw, and the black dragon suddenly slid down towards the ground. This caused Thor's back to be pressed against the ground. He dug his feet into the ground and tried to stop himself. Just like that, under the black dragon's charge, Thor's body plowed a deep trench 10 meters long on the ground. Then he was sent flying. Its defense, strength, speed, and so on have all increased by more than 1 level. With my divine power exhausted, I can't beat it. Thor was thrown in the air. His face was full of shock. He struggled to open his right palm. Following his summons, the Thor's hammer that he had thrown out flew back in a straight line. 5 fingers holding the handle of Thor's hammer, Thor controlled the direction of his flight to pull away. He wanted to escape from the black dragon. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. However, before he could fly 10 meters, with the sound of wind breaking behind him, a few black tentacles shot at him. Thor, who was flying with the Thor's hammer, was caught off guard and tied up all 4 of his limbs. The tentacles tightened their grip, and Thor's palm loosened its grip. The hammer of Thor fell straight to the ground. Before he could summon it again, the black tentacles had already wrapped around his wrist and palm. It's over. Thor smiled bitterly. He looked back and saw that the other end of the tentacle was connected to the black dragon's body. The black dragon suddenly flapped its wings and dragged Thor into the sky. Then it suddenly descended and threw his body onto the ground. It flew in circles at a low altitude, dragging Thor with it as it continued to plow the ground. On the hillside not far away, a black shadow quietly appeared. It's about time, Kyle said to himself as he shrugged and stroked his chin as he looked at the situation that had turned around. It was a very simple logic. Since there was no chance, he had to create one. Now the opportunity had come. Damn it. Thor was extremely depressed as he was dragged along the ground by the black dragon. He forcefully pulled the black tentacles and even used his teeth in an attempt to free one of his hands to control the hammer of Thor. However, the tentacles were unexpectedly tough. Coupled with the fact that they were constantly moving, it was really difficult for him to free himself. Just as Thor was at a loss, he suddenly heard the roar of a mechanical engine. The sound was getting louder and louder. It was clearly approaching him quickly. This is? Thor looked up in confusion and saw a 2-wheeled motorcycle. The driver was a silver-haired young man wearing sunglasses. The motorcycle charged into the sandstorm at high speed, ignoring the black dragon's roar as it approached him. I'm here to save you. The silver-haired young man reminded him loudly like a warm-hearted person. Don't come any closer. You'll be killed. Thor's expression changed slightly, but his warning was too late. The black dragon noticed the silver-haired young man's presence. It lowered its body and swept its tail across. Instantly, A hurricane howled and sand billowed as it attacked the silver-haired young man on the motorcycle. Good performance? Cough cough, it should be. You came at the right time. Kale coughed to cover it up. Instead of retreating, he sped up and suddenly raised the front of the motorcycle at the highest speed. The motorcycle seemed to have grown wings as it leaped high into the air. The black dragon's tail swept right under the motorcycle's wheels. The rear wheel landed first. Kale drove the motorcycle and kicked up a lot of dust. Under Thor's surprised gaze, the motorcycle came to a stop in front of him. Kyle's face was cold and expressionless. He looked down at Saul, who was on the ground, and pressed the button on the motorcycle. The weapon on the front of the motorcycle spat out a column of flame. The black tentacles of the black dragon were burned by the flame and instantly melted like snow. Get on. Kale started the motorcycle and twisted the handle to refuel it. Thor, who had just broken free from the tentacles, subconsciously flipped over and sat on the motorcycle. With the roar of the engine, the motorcycle immediately sped off. In less than half a second, the black dragon's forelimbs slammed into the ground, creating a large crater. The black dragon's scarlet beast eyes stared at the motorcycle in the distance. It flapped its wings and flew at a low altitude, breathing out hot air from its bloody mouth. It roared and chased after the motorcycle relentlessly. Thank you for saving me. Thor gasped for air as he clutched his chest armor with lingering fear. Who are you? How dare you provoke such a monster? Kale pretended not to know and asked. Be careful. Before Thor could finish, Kale suddenly changed direction. The black dragon's claw narrowly missed the motorcycle. The strong wind and sand scraped against their backs. It's too fast. If this continues, we'll all become its meal. Kale shouted in fear. Watch me. Saul nodded and opened his left palm. In less than a second, Mjolnir fell back into his hand from its master's hand. Little brother, come with me, Thor said. Before Kale could reply, his empty hand grabbed the back of Thor's collar. Both of them flew forward under the momentum of Thor's hammer. Gotcha. The sharp claws fell and the motorcycle instantly turned into a pile of scrap metal. The black dragon roared angrily, flapped its wings and chased after them in the air. Can't you hurry up? Being dragged by Thor in the air, Kale was terrified. He turned around and looked at the black dragon that maintained a distance of about 5 meters. Hot air was coming out of its nose. Thor's hammer is already at its limit. Thor gritted his teeth, took a deep breath and shouted, Heimdall! Can you see? Teleport us back. Heimdall! Thor shouted for the second time. A rainbow beam of light suddenly fell from the gloomy sky and enveloped him and Kale in the air. It's done. Seeing the familiar rainbow bridge light up, Kyle let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly moved his mind. Saul didn't notice that the black dragon chasing after them was twitching and trembling. A black shadow turned into a card that others couldn't see and entered Kyle's body like a stream of light. In the next moment, the rainbow bridge brought the two of them across the vast universe at a speed 10 million times faster than the speed of light. Chapter 201. In just a moment, the Bifrost took Thor and Kale across thousands of planets. All the colorful universe scenery turned into a blurry stream of light and retreated at an extremely fast speed. A moment ago they were still in the Whitebone Wilderness, a non-life planet at the edge of the universe, being chased by an ancient creature. In the next moment, the scene before Kyle's eyes lit up slightly, and he noticed that he was within a grand and magnificent circular hall. The outer walls and floor seemed to be completely made of polished gold, and they were glossy and reflective, and they were filled with an ancient and divine aura. In the center of the golden hall, a black uncle wearing an exquisite and thick golden armor stood firmly on the platform, waiting. He held the hilt of the long sword with both hands and inserted it into the socket in the middle of the high platform like a key. White lightning intertwined and transmitted to the surrounding outer wall, causing the outer wall to spin quickly like a top. At the inner end of the circular hall, the Bifrost was sent out from the port. At this time, because the two had successfully returned, the rotation speed of the outer wall was slowing down. The colorful light and electric light of the Bifrost were also gradually dimming. Oh, that was close. Thank you, Heimdall. After loosening his 5 fingers that were grabbing Kale's collar and confirming that they had returned to the divine realm, Thor was completely relieved. His chest was still heaving up and down, and his empty hand wiped the sweat on his forehead. This is what I should do. It seems that your investigation of the ancient battlefield did not go well. Heimdall's voice was steady and powerful, echoing slightly in the hall. As the guardian of the divine realm who guarded and was in charge of the Bifrost Gate, His attitude towards Thor was neither servile nor overbearing. Yes, there was an accident. There was a newborn ancient creature that seemed to have evolved. It actually broke through itself at the critical moment. Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Just let the soldiers pay attention in the future. Thor shrugged helplessly. Obviously he had suffered a lot just now. He was unwilling to talk about this embarrassing incident that could be regarded as a black mark of the divine realm. Thor, who was invincible in the universe battlefield, was pressed to the ground by an alien creature. If this was spread out, it would be the laughing point of the divine realm soldiers for a year. This is. Heimdall raised his eyes and stared unwaveringly at Kale. His eyes were deep and bright, and his tanned face became serious. Oh, I almost forgot. Thor scratched his head and pointed at Kale. I met this person on the ancient battlefield. He helped me escape from the ancient creature's restraint. His name is. He paused, glanced at Kale and asked curiously, Right, who are you? He was indeed a thick-skinned and rough man. Kale cursed in his heart. He smiled calmly and said, My name is Kale. I am a human from Earth. Earth? Human? I seem to have some recollection of this. Thor was doubtful. However, he was not good at using his brain, and it was painful for him to recall his distant memories. Heimdall could not stand it anymore and reminded him, Your Highness, a few hundred years ago, His Majesty Odin led an army to Earth. At that time, it was to fight against the foreign frost giants who tried to plunge Earth back into the Ice Age. The distance between Earth and the ancient battlefield is almost endless. It is separated by two worlds and the Milky Way. Without the Rainbow Bridge, even with the most advanced spaceship, it would still take more than 10 years to reach Earth. Heimdall stared at Kale with his deep eyes. He did not hide his vigilance and suspicion. Oh, right. Thor nodded and asked in surprise, Human from Earth, why did you appear on the planet of the ancient war? Kyle, on the other hand, was already prepared. He calmly used the Rubik's Cube that appeared on Earth and the wormhole on planet Sokka as an excuse. These things all had the ability to cross the universe, so half-truths were enough to fool them. So you're saying that you're very unlucky? Thor laughed loudly, naively believing Kale's explanation. Only Heimdall's face was still tense. However, this was normal. He would maintain a high level of vigilance and suspicion towards anyone who entered or exited the Rainbow Bridge in the divine realm. Speaking of which, who are you people? Where is this place? Kale pretended not to understand and said anxiously, My spaceship is broken. If you have an interstellar spaceship, can you help me return to Earth? We're not using a spaceship. Thor smiled. After thinking for a moment, he asked Heimdall, Can you open the Rainbow Bridge and send him back to Earth? Kale looked at Heimdall expectantly. Under the gazes of the two, Heimdall shook his head and replied, According to the rules of the divine realm, those who are not of the divine realm cannot open the Rainbow Bridge for them. You saved me. Can you make an exception for me? Thor had an idea. Right, how about this? I'm going to Earth now to help open the Rainbow Bridge to Earth. Your Highness, this is the rule. As the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge, I can't make an exception. You can ask His Majesty Odin for instructions. Once I get the password, I will immediately open the Rainbow Bridge. Heimdall said rigidly. When Thor heard Odin's name, he restrained his arrogance and said to Kale apologetically, I'm sorry. If you want, you can visit the divine realm. I'll see my father later and send you home after I get the password. No problem. Kale nodded. He sighed in his heart that Thor's status was not high enough. It should be because Odin had not publicly announced that he would be the next king of the divine realm, so it was so troublesome to open the Rainbow Bridge now. However, the plan was still going smoothly. It was only delayed slightly. Compared to driving a spaceship and traveling back and forth in the universe, it was better to wait for the Rainbow Bridge to open and return to Earth in an instant. And for Asgard, Kale had been looking forward to it for a long time. He had no reason to refuse a day trip to the divine realm. Thor took Kale out of the hall of the Rainbow Bridge door and walked out of the door. A physical rainbow bridge with flowing lights and colors extended straight ahead. Kale stood at the door and stopped. Below the Rainbow Bridge was a turbulent ocean. The sky above was shining with the brilliance of the sun, moon, and stars. At the end of the line of sight was a great city between heaven and earth. Tall buildings made entirely of gold stood tall and straight, like the immortal mansion of a god, shining with an inextinguishable divine radiance. In the air there were also mysterious square buildings suspended. Everything was full of mystery and strangeness, making people marvel. I haven't answered your question just now. Thor spread out his hands and said heartily, My name is Thor. Thor, son of the god King Odin. This is the divine realm at the top of the universe, Asgard. In front of you is the immortal palace, where we live in the divine realm. Chapter 202. The king of gods, Odin, Thor, these are all gods in the mythical teleportation, so they really exist in this world? Kyle let out a gasp of surprise, his handsome face full of shock. You are the first human to enter the divine dominion since ancient times. Of course, other than the people from the divine dominion, there are not many races in the universe that can set foot here. Thor looked at Kale calmly, smiled and said, through the divine dominion rainbow bridge, we can go to any corner of the 9 realms in an instant. Kale's heart moved slightly. Thor's name for the universe was 9 realms. This was a little thought-provoking. The 9 realms here were also called the 9 great countries, star regions. It represented the territory that Odin led Asgard to conquer and recover for hundreds of thousands of years. It was the territory of most of the universe, including the Milky Way. The universe was basically divided into these 9 star regions, which were the Divine Dominion, the Human World, the Flame Giant World, the Frost Giant World, the Night Elf World, the Undead World, the Dwarf World, the Light Elf World, and the Home World of the Wise Ones. The Milky Way, including Earth, was only an extremely small part of the human world. Although the 9 star regions were in the same universe, due to the space membrane between them, it was impossible to use ordinary spaceships to travel to and from the other side. They could only use the Rainbow Bridge, space wormhole, space jump, and other methods. Usually, the Asgard of the Divine Dominion that ruled the 9 realms would not interfere with the civilization wars within the star regions. Only when a race from one world broke through and invaded another world would the Divine Dominion lead the army to suppress it. For example, a few hundred years ago, the race from the Frost Giant World invaded the human world of Earth. This was the bottom line that Odin could not tolerate. Thor walked in front, leading Kale halfway to the Rainbow Bridge. The sound of horse hooves came from the front. It was a bearded man in silver armor who rushed to the front on a horse. The tall and strong white horse stopped about 5 meters in front of the two. The bearded man nimbly turned over and dismounted, the armor that reflected the light clanking. He respectfully knelt on one knee to salute Thor. Your Highness, you are back. Yes. Thor nodded and introduced the bearded man to Kale. This is my deputy Field. Field raised his head proudly. His face was even more rugged than Thor's. His thick black beard made him look like he had been through a lot. His body was full of murderous intent and divine power. Divine power? Kale nodded. With a thought, the cards on Field's body suddenly appeared. Other than the hundreds of white and green ability cards, there was also a blue ability card that was exceptionally dazzling. It represented the main genetic ability of his race. Asgard genes. The racial genes of the commoners of the Asgard divine realm. Rare blue ability card. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the earliest group of humans in the human world were moved to Asgard by Odin. Their evolution speed far exceeded that of humans, and they broke away from the category of the original human race and became an independent new race. Their strength, speed, physique, vitality, and natural lifespan were 5 times that of normal humans. They had extraordinary physical and elemental resistance, and they had a certain affinity with divine power and magic power. Interesting. Kale's eyes lit up. The physique and genes of the commoners of Asgard were almost the same as super soldiers. More importantly, they were clearly not of the god race. Why did they have such a strong divine power? It was similar to the soldiers he had met in the ancient battlefield. They also had obvious divine power. It's borrowed divine power. Does Odin have a way to bestow divine power to others? Kale thought to himself. He and Thor both had complete god race genes. They could create divine power at any time, and they could control divine power with ease. Thus they had hidden it in their bodies. Until now, even Thor did not realize that he was also of the god race. Deputy Field was different. The divine power on this person was too obvious. It was as if he had been infected. Once he used it, he could not use it himself. This is a human from Earth, Kale. He just saved my life. Thor introduced Kale to Field. When Field heard the first half of the sentence, he disdained it. When he heard the second half, he looked at Kale in disbelief. A mere human saved Prince Thor? In the face of doubt, Thor nodded again. He patted Kale's shoulder and said, although he's a human, his bravery is no less than that of our soldiers. Field was still a little unconvinced. Suddenly he thought of something and quickly reported, Your Highness. His Majesty is looking for you now. He asked me to tell you to go to the palace quickly. Father is looking for me? Why didn't you say so earlier? Thor was shocked. He grasped Thor's hammer tightly and floated up. He said to Field in the air, "Deputy Kale is my distinguished guest. Show him around the divine territory. After that, with Father's permission, I will send him back to Earth using the Rainbow Bridge." Before he finished speaking, Thor's red cloak flapped in the wind. He quickly flew to the Golden Palace at the highest point. "Yes, Deputy." Field accepted the order helplessly. He stood up from the ground and looked at the silent Kale in front of him. He waved his hand and said, "This way, please. Then I'll have to trouble you." Kale smiled faintly and followed Field from the Rainbow Bridge to the Golden City where the Asgardians lived. Entering the Golden City, the city was more peaceful than expected. Along the way, there were soldiers in silver armor and holding silver spears patrolling quietly. On the bustling streets, the civilians, regardless of gender, were mostly dressed in vintage robes. Their faces were filled with happy smiles and gentleness. As the ruler of the 9 realms, Asgard had not been involved in any war for tens of thousands of years. It was a paradise independent of the universe. However, when Field passed by the streets, the citizens all cast doubtful glances at Kale beside him. There were only tens of thousands of civilians in Asgard. They were very sensitive to unfamiliar faces, especially when Kale was dressed in a leather jacket and jeans. "You are the first human to enter the divine realm. This is a great honor. If you can return to your home planet, you can brag about it for the rest of your life." There was a hint of mockery in Field's tone. He was not very interested in the weak human race. Kale did not mind. He looked around and asked, "Asgard doesn't seem to be pursuing technology. Do they only use cold weapons to conquer foreign battlefields? Firearms are something that only weak creatures rely on." Field snorted and said proudly, "We Asgardians are born with outstanding physiques. Together with refined weapons and the support of divine power, we are invincible against any enemy force." "Impressive." Kale gave Field a thumbs up. This made Field even more arrogant. He secretly worked with the Vice to figure out the structure of Asgard's forces. Every divine realm soldier had the physique of Captain America. Together with the semi-divine weapon that was not inferior to the vibrating golden shield, and gods like Odin and Thor, this was not an existence that ordinary races could fight against. Chapter 203. A winged Pegasus that can travel 1,000 miles in a day and increase divine power? If we had such a horse, we probably wouldn't have to build trains and high-speed trains back on Earth. This is Asgard's dueling training ground? It's so vast and spectacular, more than 5 times bigger than Earth's Olympic Stadium. No wonder it's called the Divine Realm. Kyle's surprised and envious expression when he saw all the new things in God's domain, like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world, made Felder, the deputy general who was leading him around God's domain, very happy. There are even more magical and extraordinary things. "Come, I'll take you to some other places," Felder hurriedly called out. His inner pride and vanity made him want nothing more than to take Kale on a tour of all the places in the divine realm so that he could broaden his horizons and admire Asgard's immortality and greatness from the bottom of his heart. After passing through the residential streets, the horse track and the training grounds, Felder and Kale continued to venture deeper into the divine realm. Soon they arrived in front of something that looked like a sacrificial temple. The path was paved with clean white bricks that led to the temple. There was not a speck of dust on it. Fire pans were placed on both sides of the path every 5 meters, the flames inside burning brightly. The ancient Greek-style temple was made of pure white bricks and hung sacred at the edge of a waterfall at the end of the ground. 2 tall guards wearing golden armor and holding long axes were standing guard in front of the temple gate, not moving at all. The voices of many Asgardian youths could be faintly heard from within the temple. From time to time, a faint milky white light would fly out from the temple's roof and disappear into the bright stars in the sky. Felder only led Kale past the temple's main entrance. Kale didn't care at first, but as if his body had sensed something, he suddenly stopped in front of the temple and looked at the ancient temple. "General Felder, what is this place?" Kale asked curiously. "This is Asgard's Hall of Valhalla." Felder looked at the temple with unwavering faith and explained in reverence. "This is also known as the Cradle of Dreams for divine generals and divine soldiers. It's a sacred temple that King Odin bestowed upon us with divine power." Martyr's Palace. Kale rubbed his chin, a glint in his eyes. He smiled at Ferd. "General Ferd, can I take a look inside the Martyr's Palace? Just one look, I want to feel the presence of the King of Pantheon up close." "This? According to the rules, no one can enter the Martyr's Palace without the qualifications of a divine realm soldier." Field stuttered, a difficult look on his face. Even if he had entered the God's domain military's horse track or training field, he wouldn't have hesitated in the slightest. Now, however, he hesitated for a full 5 seconds. In the end, under Kale's expectant gaze, Field gritted his teeth and agreed. However, since you are His Highness Thor's honored guest and can step into the God realm, I will make an exception for you. Remember, just go in and take a look. Don't touch anything else. Of course. Kyle smiled calmly and nodded in agreement. Since Field had made his decision, he no longer hesitated. He led Kale straight to the Martyr's Palace's entrance. Before they could cross the threshold, the golden guards in front of the door swung their axes. The crisp sound of metal clashing rang out as they stopped the two from entering the Martyr's Palace. Move aside. I am Thor's Deputy General, Field. I wish to enter the Martyr's Palace. Field displayed his identity card in a domineering manner. When the golden guards saw this, they quickly raised their axes and stood guard like stone statues once more. The Martyr's Palace flickered with fiery light, its gentle radiance illuminating the hall. Kale looked up slightly and saw the golden statue of Odin wielding the Spear of Eternity and riding an 8-legged Pegasus. There were other statues in the corners of the hall, all of them bent over and holding large balls. More than a dozen Asgardian youths, regardless of gender, dressed in plain white robes, were diligently and religiously worshipping the statue of Odin. Their faces were dignified and solemn as they tried to touch the balls in each corner. Even if the youths noticed Kale and Field's entrance, they didn't pay them any attention. They were immersed in the sacred ceremony of the shrine. Asgardian commoners will enter the Martyr's Palace when they turn 16 and become adults. This isn't just a necessary ceremony. It's also a process of inheriting divine power, Field explained softly. Kale just happened to see a girl reach out to touch one of the balls. Specks of bright light flickered, baptizing her body. Divine power appeared from nowhere and covered her body. These balls represent different divine powers. Thor's power, the fire god's power, the light god's power, and so on. Every Asgardian commoner can try to touch and sense them. Based on their affinity with different divine powers, they can receive the corresponding divine powers baptism and protection. After hearing Field's explanation, Kale finally understood where the Asgardian soldiers' divine power came from. Every god was like a divine power source. When they were alive, they stored their divine power in the Martyr's Palace, waiting for others to sense and receive it. After circling half the hall of the Martyr's Palace, Kale was surprised to find an anomaly in a corner. The statues and inheritance balls were covered in black cloth. The cloth was covered in dust accumulated over the years, and it didn't fit in with the holiness of the surroundings. Don't stop here. Field reached out to pull Kale and warned in a low voice, that's the inheritance point of the death god's power. Commoners are forbidden from sensing it now. Death god. Kale fell into deep thought. He naturally understood the reason behind this. The goddess of death, Hela, was the elder sister of Thor who had been stripped of her divine status by Odin and banished to the undead world due to her excessive ambition. At this time, a blinding pillar of lightning lit up from Thor's inheritance point and enveloped the body of a youth. The pillar of light reached the ceiling of the Martyr's Palace and illuminated the hall. This scene caused the other youths to exclaim in admiration and envy. TSK. Our Thor's army has another potential candidate to be groomed into a divine champion, Field exclaimed in admiration. Field sighed in admiration and explained, every Asgardian has a different affinity for divine power. Some can only guide the power of the thunder god to train their bodies, while others can borrow divine power for themselves. General Field, it's definitely the latter, Kale said with a smile. Of course. Field puffed out his chest proudly. When I sensed Thor's power back then, I was able to trigger a pillar of divine power with a 2-meter radius. Even His Highness Thor was alarmed. Kale circled around and finally stopped in front of the sphere containing the fire god's power. He felt a strange feeling from the unseen world. This ball was resonating with the divine power in his body. Did the fire god, who was born in the universe a long time ago, leave something here? Kale wondered. Seeing his abnormality, Field walked up in surprise. What's wrong? It's about time we should go out. General Field, can I sense this? Kale pointed at the sphere in front of him and asked with a serious expression. You. Field froze for a moment before laughing out loud. It's not that I don't want you to sense it, but you humans can't sense divine power at all. In other words, out of all the races in the universe, only us Asgardians, the loyal subjects of our god, can receive divine power's protection. Then I'll try. Chapter 204. Divine Palace. Built in the center of Alaska, it represented the core of the universe, supreme power, and divine power. At the same time, it was the exclusive residence and meeting place of the god race. At this time, in the main hall of the sacred Golden Palace, an old man with white hair and beard sat on the throne of the King of Gods. His right eye was covered by a golden lens, and his only remaining eye was deep and bright, flashing with faint wisdom and majesty. He wore a full set of golden armor and held a golden scepter that represented supreme power. A red cloak was draped over his back, and his old body kept bobbing up and down, emitting a monstrous divine aura. The protagonist of Norse mythology, the king of the gods, the master of the 9 realms. At this time, Odin sat on the throne and looked down calmly at his 2 sons standing side by side in the hall. Thor and Loki. One of them had a rough face and a strong body. He wore golden armor and held Thor's hammer. His eyes were full of vigor, and his aura was as domineering as thunder. He was undoubtedly a warrior among warriors. The other had a feminine face and a thin body. He wore a black robe and held the World Tree staff. He had a wicked smile on his face, and his mysterious and evil aura was unfathomable. Thor. Why didn't you change into a clean set of clothes when you were disheveled when meeting father? Loki glanced at Saul intentionally or unintentionally and started to lecture him calmly. I came back from the ancient battlefield and rushed over as soon as I left the Bifrost. I believe father won't mind. Thor smiled and scratched his golden hair as he lowered his head and said to Odin. But Loki wanted to say something more, but Odin coughed lightly and interrupted him. All right, you 2 brothers have been arguing since you were young. Now pay attention to the situation. Yes, father. Loki quickly bowed and saluted. Thor pouted and bowed as well. I called you 2 here to remind you. I will pass down the throne of Alaska in about 3 or 4 years. Odin looked at Thor and Loki with only one eye. He tapped the floor with his scepter as if he was knocking on the hearts of the 2 gods. He said in a deep voice, one of you will inherit the throne. 3 to 4 years was a very short time to the divine race. With a smile on his face, Thor made no attempt to hide his joy and impatience. He raised the hammer of Thor high up and said straightforwardly, Father, pass the throne to me. I swear that I will devote my life to Alaska and do my best to maintain the peace of the 9 realms. Loki's heart trembled, but his face was as calm as before. His eyes sank slightly and no one knew what he was thinking. Odin took in the reactions of his 2 sons. After a moment of silence, he said in a deep voice, There's no rush. We'll see how you perform over the next few years. In the end, we'll choose a new king that won't be controversial. All right, I'll definitely prove myself on the battlefield, Thor said heartily. I won't let you down. Rocky bowed. That's right. Father, there's one thing that I hope you'll grant me. Thor wanted to take this opportunity to tell him about Kale, but at this moment, the Palace of Immortals trembled slightly. What's going on? Thor's and Rocky's expressions changed. Not only did the earthquake not stop, but it was getting bigger and bigger. Even the golden handicrafts and ornaments were clinking and rolling to the ground. Odin couldn't sit still and stood up from his seat. His one-eyed dignified gaze swept past Thor and Rocky, and looked at the scene outside the door of the main hall behind them. Thor and Rocky turned around together. When they saw the source of the shocking change, their hearts trembled. It was the same shock as when they heard that the throne was about to be passed on. Outside the door of the main hall, a flame with a radius of 10 meters rose from the bottom to the top like a totem pole. It was so vigorous that it went straight into the stars in the sky. The flame was golden with a hint of red, burning a large area of the sky bright red. Thousands of bright stars appeared dim at this moment. This sudden change caused all the creatures in Alaska to look at the flames that connected the sky and the earth in horror. In that instant, the flame illuminated the divine realm. That direction is the Martyr's Palace? Rocky's mouth twitched as he said with wide eyes, Has there ever been such an exaggerated perception of divine power since the Martyr's Palace was built? As far as I know, there hasn't been. Thor shook his head. Who said there hasn't been? Odin retorted. He looked at the burning clouds in the sky and said thoughtfully, Back then, when Heimdall sensed divine power, there was a similar scene. Thor and Rocky looked at each other and said in surprise at the same time, Father, do you mean to say? Alaska has another guardian of the realm of the gods. Rainbow Bridge, teleportation portal. Wielding his sword with both hands, Heimdall suddenly opened his eyes and looked forward. It was as if he could ignore spatial distance and directly see the scene inside the Martyr's Palace. How is this possible? How can it be him? Heimdall's eyes narrowed, shock appearing on his usually calm face for the first time. At the same time, inside the martyr's palace, Kale's right hand rested on the sphere. The pillar of flame that resonated with it expanded outward, enveloping Ferd, the dozen or so Alaskan youths, and even the entire temple. The real yet illusory flame soared into the sky and disappeared into the universe. There really is something, Kale softly muttered to himself. Not only was his constitution guiding the remnant divine power of the fire god, but he also didn't know which fire god had left something inside the sphere. That thing could only be taken out by another fire god. Perhaps it was a personal treasure trove that no one had noticed for countless years after the fire god's death. Now I've gotten lucky. Kale calmed his mind and used his divine power to resonate with the fire god. He used it as a key to open the treasure trove and slowly took out the item. Bits of fragmented memories gathered into a string, piecing together a complete message in his mind. Within Kale's card space, a card gradually materialized from nothingness. It shone with a dazzling purple light, standing out among the other cards. Sword of Eternity Forging Method. The forging method of the Sword of Eternity. Rare purple ability card. Materials required: World Tree Branch, Eternal Fire, Wuru Metal, Rubik's Cube Fragment, Crushed Stone Ingot, Heavenly God's Blood, etc. Must be forged in a superstellar furnace and possess the power of a cosmic planetary-grade divine weapon. It's not the real thing but only the forging method of a divine weapon? The previous fire god should have at least left his divine weapon behind. Kale sighed inwardly. The materials needed to forge the sword were rare and precious. He didn't have most of them and had never even heard of some of them. He could only slowly collect them in the future. After getting what he wanted, Kale withdrew his hand. Only then did the flame gradually fade away. The surface of his body still burned with a faint, transparent crimson divine flame. Dense divine power continued to leak out. With a crack, the sphere that allowed him to sense the fire god's divine power shattered, indicating that the divine power inside had been emptied. Chapter 205. Within the martyr's palace, it wasn't just Ferd. The other Asgardian youths and golden guards all looked like they'd seen a ghost as they stared dumbstruck at the blazing Kale. The torrential fire god's power seemed to be possessed as it clung to Kale's body in a frenzy. Strands of divine brilliance flowed from his every movement. He stood calmly within the martyr's palace, his golden eyes sparkling brightly. He really did look like a true god. Me? Didn't I say earlier that I'm just a human from Earth? But I'm the first human to set foot in outer space in the divine realm. Facing Field's question, Kale shrugged and said in a serious tone, "How is that possible? How can you be just a human? How can a mere human sense it?" Ferd's heart seemed to have suffered a heavy blow as he forced a smile in a daze. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something as he turned his gaze back to the broken sphere in the statue's hands. "Oh no." Ferd's face was deathly pale as he said in a panic, "It's one thing for someone not from the divine realm to touch the fire god's inheritance, but you even broke it. This fire god's power just loves to pounce on me. There's nothing I can do about it." Kale sighed heavily and patted Ferd's shoulder, saying meaningfully, "Also, General Ferd. General Ferd, I had to get your permission before I touched the inheritance point. I didn't know something like this would happen." Ferd wanted to cry but no tears came out. His expression was extremely ugly. No matter what, he had to shoulder at least half of the blame. Kale stroked his chin and suggested, "How about I return the divine power now? The fire god's inheritance sphere is broken. How are you going to return it?" Ferd glared at him. Kale continued, "Why don't we hurry up and leave? The people outside the martyr's palace might not have noticed the situation here." "Didn't you notice just now? How could the people outside the palace not have noticed the fiery light? Maybe even His Highness has already." Before Field could finish his words, the sound of galloping horses came from outside the hall. Along with the clanking sound of armor, a loud voice penetrated the distance and rang in their ears. "Pass on His Majesty's order. I invite the person who triggered the fiery miracle to come to the main hall of the Immortal Palace immediately. No delay." "What should we do now, General Ferd?" After the messenger left, Kale turned to Felder and seriously asked for his opinion. "What else can we do? Enter the Immortal Palace and meet His Majesty Odin. Worst comes to worst, I'll be a man again in 80 years. Field looked as if he had nothing left to live for and shrugged. 10 minutes later, in the hall of the Immortal Palace, Kale and Field stood side by side in the middle of the hall. Thor and Loki, who were a little ahead of them, looked sideways at Kale. Thor had a strange look on his face. Loki frowned slightly. Odin, who was sitting on the throne, remained silent. He looked at Kale carefully with his majestic and deep eye. No one knew what he was thinking. Kale, who was burning with uncontrollable flames, became the focus of all the gods. For a moment, the majestic golden palace fell into a strange silence. How could he rely on his status as a lieutenant in the divine realm? The proud field didn't even dare to breathe loudly. He lowered his head like a child who had done something wrong. Cold sweat soaked the lining of his armor. Kale took advantage of this opportunity to look at the gods in the hall with his head held high and his chest puffed out without any fear. Thor didn't need to be mentioned. He had seen him before. The one next to him should be his troublemaking second brother, Loki. It was basically the same as seen in the movies. However, Kale looked at him from a close distance. That faintly discernible evil smile and the sinister expression that seemed to be brewing a belly full of evil tricks made him have an inexplicable impulse to baptize and barbecue him with flames. Looking ahead, the one sitting on the golden throne was the king of gods, Odin. After a brief look, Kale's heart trembled. He had the illusion that he was facing an invincible god of war with a human body. He subconsciously looked away. This was Odin. Although he wasn't close enough to peek at his ability card, Kale was still very sure that the one in front of him was the king of gods of Asgard, the universe's supreme master he had met now, a true god creature at the top of the universe's power level. He had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, ruled the 9 worlds, established the divine realm, released the Rainbow Bridge with his own godly weapon, and could bestow godly power and spells to others. He was omnipotent. If Thor was only a slightly more powerful alien, then Odin could be considered a true god. Does anyone want to come out and explain? Odin said calmly, breaking the silence in the main hall. Field fell to his knees with a thud. Your Majesty, it's my fault. I shouldn't have brought this human into the martyr's palace without permission. That's why this happened. Loki snorted coldly. His voice was calm, but there was a hidden murderous intent. Lieutenant Field, not only did he enter the martyr's palace, but he also violated the divine realm's laws from the moment he set foot in the divine realm. Now he's even more guilty. How can you bear the consequences with your status? Field's face was drained of blood. He could only kowtow to admit his guilt. That's enough. Thor took a deep breath, walked out and stood in front of Field. He knelt on one knee and reported to Odin, Father, it was I who brought Field here. I was the one who brought Kyle into the divine realm. I was also the one who ordered Field to show Kyle around. If all of this is considered a mistake, then I will take full responsibility. You'll take responsibility? You really know how to cause trouble. I've only just told you about the throne, and you expect me to pass it to you with peace of mind? Odin's words were laced with anger. Thor gritted his teeth and bowed silently. Loki saw all of this. The corners of his lips curled into an evil smile, but it quickly disappeared. Odin stared straight at Kale and asked in a dignified voice, You're Kale, right? Yes, Your Majesty. Kale bowed slightly to show his respect. He didn't kneel. I'll give you a choice. Odin raised his voice, his powerful words echoing throughout the hall. From now on, join the divine realm and become its guardian. You'll stay here and watch over the martyr's palace. You'll have the same authority as Heimdall and only one level below me. You'll be on the same level as Thor and Loki. Father? Loki's expression changed. He was about to say something when Odin raised a hand to stop him. Thor and Field raised their heads to look at Kale, full of anticipation for his reply. Join the divine realm. Countless beings in the universe dreamed of it. Most people wouldn't refuse. Unfortunately, Kale was no ordinary person. Chapter 206. Forgive me for refusing. His voice was not loud, but it was just loud enough to echo in the quiet main hall of the immortal palace. Everyone who heard this answer, except for the shrewd Odin, changed their expressions at the same time. He actually refused. Loki opened his mouth in shock. He looked at the expressionless Kale and wanted to ask him loudly, Do you know what you just refused? The guardian of the divine realm. He could be considered a god in one step. Apart from the high and mighty Odin, even princes like them couldn't give orders to the guardian. It could be said that to some extent, it was an honorary position on par with the royal family of the gods. Moreover, the guardian wasn't the Rainbow Bridge, which was the entrance to the divine realm, but the martyr's palace in the depths of the divine realm. It was the most leisurely and stable job. Thor and Field lowered their heads even more. At this time, Kale's refusal of Odin's suggestion might be the fuse that caused a major change. Odin's anger would shake the entire 9 realms. Otherwise, how could the Divine King conquer the vast 9 realms if he didn't have the slightest temper and fighting spirit? Of course, after Odin intended to abdicate due to his many hidden injuries, his temper had become much more restrained. He was more like a gentle old man in his twilight years. Odin's scepter knocked on the floor. Thor saw that something was wrong and hurriedly pleaded for Kale. Father, Kale has always wanted to return to Earth. I said there was one more thing to do before. It was to open the Rainbow Bridge and send him back. Odin was silent. He looked at Kale majestically as if waiting for his reply. Kale's face was expressionless. He said sincerely, I left Earth and have been in outer space for a long time. I've long wanted to go back. The divine realm is good, but in my heart, it can't compare to my hometown. This was naturally his heartfelt words, but he put them in a much more tactful way. In reality, Kale didn't care about the guardian of the divine realm at all. Let him stay in the divine realm and guard the martyr's palace? He was thinking too much. There was no reason for him to become a guard for the divine territory instead of being a hero on Earth. Odin didn't take out anything that was enough to move him. It was impossible for him to trick him with empty promises and threaten him. Father, in my opinion, why don't we lock him up with the heavenly lock and use him as the fire god's inheritance point? Rocky suggested slowly. How vicious. Do you have a grudge against me? Kale glanced at Loki and secretly made a note in his little notebook. He would settle it slowly in the future. Father. Kale is not from our world, and the matter of the fire god's power was purely an accident. Just let him go back to Earth. Thor pleaded. Odin remained silent, his gaze fixed on Kale. Kale's body tensed up slightly and he sighed in his heart. Fortunately, the previous fire god's power was attached to the surface of his body, concealing his own internal power. If Odin knew that Kale was a god, it would be another difficult situation to deal with. After all, the Asgard divine clan was hostile to most of the other divine clans. You can go back to Earth. The first half of Odin's sentence didn't let Kale relax, but the second half followed. But you still have to accept the position of guardian of the divine realm. Otherwise, I can't let you leave the divine realm. What do you mean? Kale asked seriously. You can get some of the rights of a guardian of the divine realm, such as using the Rainbow Bridge to travel to and from the divine realm, or entering the immortal palace. The obligation you have to pay is that when Asgard encounters foreign enemies and disasters, you will need to lend a helping hand as a guardian of the divine realm. After Odin finished speaking, not only was Kale stunned, but Thor and Loki also had expressions of disbelief. The rules of this position were too lax, or rather, the conditions given were too benevolent. At this moment, Thor and Loki both doubted in their hearts whether or not they were really their biological children. At this age, she had never seen her imperial father take a step back and compromise on his own accord. Just for a human from Earth. Is that simple? Kale asked in surprise, looking suspiciously at Odin. This old man who had lived for God knows how many years, could he be scheming something? Is that simple? Odin nodded. Then I'll agree to the position of guardian of the divine realm for the time being. Kyle nodded. This condition was unexpectedly easy. That's good, Lieutenant Field. Odin changed the topic. Field immediately shivered and said loudly, Here. Take Kale to the divine realm's treasury and let him pick anything to take away as a token of the guardian. Odin said in a low voice. No problem. Field stood up happily as if he had received a reward. He pulled Kale's hand and quickly left the cold and majestic golden hall. After the two left, Thor stood up. He and Loki were in a daze as they looked up at Odin on the throne in confusion. Do you two know Earth? Odin asked calmly. We do. Father went to Earth to fight and expel the frost giants. It's located in the human world at the edge of the Milky Way in the wilderness. Thor and Loki each gave an answer. It said that the divine realm is the head of the 9 realms, above all other realms. But in fact, the most powerful realm in the 9 realms is the human world. Odin paused. His one eye showed a complicated expression. And the human world is said to be centered around the Milky Way alliance. But secretly, Earth is the new star with endless potential and rapid development. Thor and Loki heard this and still didn't agree. Sometimes, deep-rooted ideas for hundreds of thousands of years couldn't be completely changed with a few simple words. Father chose to let him go just because he's an Earthling? Loki asked incredulously. Of course it's not that simple. Odin shook his head. Looking at his 2 beloved sons, he said inexplicably, You'll know in the future. I'm not letting him go. I'm building a connection between him and the divine realm. Kale, I haven't heard this name for a long time. In the basement of the immortal palace, Odin's treasury. In the passage leading to the treasury, the faint and cold light-colored floor was laid. Some blue flames flickered on both sides. The tall guards were silent like statues. Little brother Kale. No, now you should be called Guardian Kale. Field smiled. While leading the way, he said enthusiastically to Kale, "You must take care of little brother in the future." Little brother? Kale glanced at his rough and familiar face and his thick black beard. He sighed and said, "You're my older brother. This can't be changed." "Aha, you're too polite." Field laughed and said emotionally, "His Majesty might be in a good mood today. He actually agreed to let you be a guardian, rewarded you with treasures, and allowed you to return to your home planet." "It's quite abnormal." Kale shrugged. He also felt a little surprised in his heart. Logically speaking, no matter how you look at it, this matter shouldn't be resolved so easily. Could it be that Odin read the script? Chapter 207. At the end of the underground passage was a huge door. The door was almost 10 meters tall and went straight to the ceiling. It was so tightly shut that there was not a single gap. The main door was carved with Odin in armor, riding a divine horse, holding the eternal spear and conquering the 9 worlds. The golden guards on both sides of the door were 2 meters tall. They held long axes and guarded the door like mighty stone statues. With Odin's verbal command, Field led Kyle to the door without any hindrance. "Kale. Next, you will face the most precious and abundant treasury in the entire universe. Every item inside is a treasure of the star field or even a top weapon of the 9 worlds." Field reminded him verbally. His eyes were filled with envy. Even he, who had worked so hard to settle the disputes of the 9 worlds, didn't have the right to set foot in Odin's treasury. As far as he knew, only 3 people had entered Odin's treasury and taken one of the items inside. Thor took Thor's hammer. Loki couldn't take Thor's hammer, so he chose the World Tree Staff. The last person was Heimdall, the Guardian, who obtained the Rainbow Bridge Sword. Remember, His Majesty Odin asked you to choose one item. You can only take one item inside. If you are greedy and take too many, even I will be implicated. Field's tone was unprecedentedly serious. "I understand." Kale nodded. His eyes were shining. He also had a faint sense of anticipation in his heart. Odin's treasury. It was nothing more than the items Odin had collected and stored over the years when he conquered the 9 worlds. The items inside were not divine weapons. Even Odin couldn't afford to lose face. Under the strenuous push of the guard, the huge door of the treasury slowly opened inwards. It only opened a passage that allowed one person to pass through. Kale did not hesitate and stepped in. It was pitch black without any light source. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hall. As if sensing the presence of someone, the blue flames hanging on the walls and ceiling lit up, revealing a path that led deeper into the hall. At the side of the treasury hall, there was a golden platform that glowed faintly every 5 meters. On top of each platform was a treasure that had been sealed for countless years, quietly waiting for a fated person to take it away. "Let me see what these things are." Kale took a deep breath, rubbed his palms, licked his dry lips and quickly approached the first treasure. It was a crystal ball with its own light source. It was sparkling and translucent like a luminous pearl, giving off a mysterious aura. Compared to Earth, Kale was already a well-informed all-round hero, not to mention the artificial intelligence vice. It had the database of items from Planet Soccer. However, looking at the crystal ball in front of him, he still couldn't identify what it was. "It seems to be tainted with the aura of magic," Kale said to himself as he focused his mind on the crystal ball. An item card quickly appeared. Agamotto Crystal Ball, a treasure passed down by the sorcerers. Gold item card. It has the power of all-seeing. It can cross multiple dimensions and world boundaries to detect the source of magic and energy. It requires magic to activate. As long as there is a trace of the corresponding energy, it can detect the coordinates of the existence of the creature. When used to the extreme, it can detect dangerous events from the future. As expected. Kale touched his chin and whispered, "Odin must be related to the ancient sorcerers on Earth. Otherwise, why would he have this thing?" However, this was a purely auxiliary magic tool. Kale directly skipped over it and walked to the second item. It was a compact eyeball-shaped accessory. It was even scarier than the crystal ball. As he walked closer, the golden pupil seemed to be staring at him. Warlock's Eye, A treasure passed down by the sorcerers. Gold item card. The Warlock's Eye is a top-notch magic tool worn on the chest. When used with magic, a golden eye will appear on the forehead. It can see through everything and trace back to the origin of the universe. When used to the extreme, it can emit a dazzling light, dissipating the dark fog and illusions in the dark dimension. It is especially effective against dark creatures in multiple dimensions. Kale was speechless. One or two items? Why are all the things in Odin's treasure trove from Earth? Odin, this old guy, don't tell me that he specializes in stealing treasures from Earth's ancient era? Kale quickly walked to the third treasure. It was a black box emitting cold air. When he was 3 meters away, even his skin felt cold. Chest of Ice. Divine Weapon of the Frost Giants. Gold item card. It contains endless cold air. When used, it can instantly turn an area into a frozen land. When used to the extreme, it can turn a life planet into an eternal ice age. Kale frowned and took a step back in discomfort. The divine power in his body was restless. He had the instinct to release torrential divine flames to resist the cold air of the icebox. The frost giants and the fire gods were mortal enemies. Kale suddenly realized this and retreated from the icebox. Next, he checked the treasures stored in the treasure trove. There were treasures from the higher-level creatures of the 9 worlds. There were low-level divine tools made by the branches of the world and the Wuru. They were all divine items that were at least gold rank. Among them, 2 items made Kale stop for a long time. Life card, a monument of life and time. Gold item card. A monument left behind by the distant civilization of Atlantis. The words engraved on it were very mysterious. It recorded the evolution of living things. Any living thing could evolve to the highest level. It might have come from an unknown universe. Unfortunately, no matter how many times Vice analyzed it with the system program, he still could not decipher the mysterious words. Kale could only give up temporarily, but he also kept an eye on it. There was another item, the Infinity Glove. Yes, it was the Infinity Glove. However, it was a counterfeit of the Infinity Glove. Infinity Glove counterfeit. A counterfeit of the legendary glove that can control 6 cosmic stones. Gold item card. It can only store 1 cosmic stone. After a short period of use, the glove will gradually break and be destroyed. In an instant, it can perfectly release the energy of a single cosmic stone. Even if it was just a counterfeit of the Infinity Glove, it was still not to be underestimated. If Kale still had the Dimensional Stone, he would probably choose the counterfeit of the Infinity Glove without hesitation. It could be used as an ultimate amulet, a trump card. What a pity. Kale looked at the Infinity Glove with nostalgia. He turned and walked to the end of the treasure trove. There was one last treasure that had not been checked yet. A golden fireplate was placed on the display table. It seemed to be burning with an ordinary flame. The light of the flame shone on his face slightly. This is... Kale's heart skipped a beat. He felt that his divine power was unnaturally attracted and affected by the flame in the fireplate. Eternal Fire, a divine tool of the flame giants. Gold item card. It was neither created by God nor by man. The past, present, and future were always a ball of eternal living fire. It burned according to a certain scale and extinguished according to a certain scale. Chapter 208. In the main hall of the Palace of Immortals. Your Majesty. Guardian Kale has already chosen a divine artifact in the treasury. Now Prince Thor is taking him to the Rainbow Bridge. Field respectfully knelt on one knee and reported to Odin on the throne. What did he choose? Odin squinted his one eye and asked in a low voice. The Eternal Fire. He took the Eternal Fire. Field answered carefully. What? That human dared to choose the Eternal Fire and take it out of the realm of the gods? Before Odin could say anything, Loki, who was still serving in the main hall, was shocked. He breathed quickly and said, Father, the Eternal Fire is... I know. Odin shook his head slightly and said in a low voice, I said he can choose anything in the treasury and take it away. Since he chose the Eternal Fire, then so be it. Yes. Loki lowered his head and looked unwilling. The Eternal Fire was related to the future of the realm of the gods. It was important to trigger the twilight of the gods. Yet, it was given to an outsider. At the same time, at the Rainbow Bridge of the realm of the gods. Thor held Thor's hammer in one hand and Kale's arm in the other. The two flew out of the Palace of the Gods and landed at the end of the Rainbow Bridge. Kyle was still hugging the golden fireplate. There was no fuel in the plate, and the flames were burning fiercely within it, flickering without extinguishing. Kale, I'll leave you here. There are still some small disputes at the edge of the 9 realms that I need to deal with. Thor looked at Kale sincerely. His eyes fell on the eternal fire in his hand and said, I didn't expect that you would become the second guardian of the realm of the gods in the blink of an eye. I didn't expect it either. Kale shrugged and smiled. You must miss your home. I won't delay your trip. My father often mentions the name, Earth. Thor smiled and scratched his head. If I have the chance in the future, I will go to Earth. No problem. When the time comes, I'll definitely receive you well. Now that you know how good Earth is, maybe you won't want to return to the Divine Dominion anymore. Kale teased and turned to walk into the Rainbow Palace. He waved his hand behind him and said, Goodbye. Goodbye. Thor's loud voice rang out from behind him. Kale didn't turn back as he walked straight into the Rainbow Palace. Heimdall, who had been guarding this place, stood high up on the platform. He opened his eyes and looked down at him. Heimdall. Now I should be qualified to use the Bifrost. Kale and Heimdall looked at each other and said calmly and indifferently. Heimdall nodded. Compared to before, his attitude was much more relaxed. He replied calmly and forcefully, Naturally, we are both guardians. You have the right to use the Rainbow Bridge to go to any known peaceful place in the 9 realms. He paused for a moment before continuing, If you want to enter the divine territory from the outside, just shout my name. My eyes can see anywhere in the 9 realms. As long as I see you, I can use the Rainbow Bridge to pick you up. Okay, I'm going back to Earth now. Right now. Kyle snapped his fingers, his body and mind quietly becoming excited and joyful. Take a few steps forward. Under Heimdall's instructions, Kale walked to the inner part of the palace. The device at the Rainbow Palace's port was aimed at his body. Target Earth. I'm going to activate the Rainbow Bridge. Heimdall said as he walked to the highest point of the central platform. He held the Rainbow Bridge sword with both hands and raised it. He aimed the sword at the key-like socket and suddenly inserted it. Bzzz. White electric light was transmitted from the Rainbow Bridge to the surrounding outer walls. The Rainbow Palace spun quickly. The port condensed and spewed out colorful light. It instantly covered Kale, who was holding the fire plate. From the outside, one could see that the Rainbow Palace was also at the edge of the waterfall cliff. The tank-like cannon on the outside adjusted its angle and shot out a dazzling rainbow light beam. It instantly pierced through the divine territory and crossed the 9 realms. Kale shuttled through the Rainbow Bridge. The scene in the star field in his vision was chaotic. The bright stars blurred and retreated. The ambiguous feeling of crossing the universe disappeared. After leaving the divine territory, Kale's body followed the rainbow light beam and landed on a barren land. Earth, Kale am back. Before he could check his location, even a cold-tempered person like Kale couldn't help but clench his fists and shout at the sky. But even he couldn't hear the voice that came out of his mouth. Soon he keenly noticed that something was wrong with the surrounding environment. The grayish-white ground where not even an inch of grass grew was full of potholes and circular dents. There was no trace of life in the vast area in his vision. When he looked up, he saw the boundless starry sky. Most importantly, there was no air, no sound, vacuum? Realizing this, Kale frowned slightly. He first drew the eternal fire in his hand into a card and then summoned Venom. Symbiosis formed a full-body combat suit. Vice transformed into a headset and was also wrapped in Venom's coat. This time, its voice finally entered his ears clearly. Master. The soil here is rich in elements such as silicon, aluminum, potassium, barium, hafnium, and rare earth elements. There is no water source, atmosphere, food supply, etc. The preliminary judgment is that the environment is not suitable for human beings to live in. It is ruled out as the Earth's area. Of course, I know this is not the Earth. What the hell is Heimdall doing? Did he get this place wrong? Kale's face was slightly cold as he looked around at the barren scene. The vacuum couldn't transmit sound, so there was no way to call Heimdall to take him back to the divine territory. On the silver-white ground where he stood, the rune circle of the Rainbow Bridge was imprinted on it, and there were sparks emitting green smoke. Kale tried to take a step. His body was light as a feather, and he could directly jump up a few meters with the smallest unit of control. But the highly evolved divine body quickly adapted to the harsh environment in a short time. He ran across a few kilometers at top speed, and all he passed was monotonous and desolate land. There were many pits, and he could see some residual detection equipment on the bare surface. If I'm not wrong, this should be, Kale murmured and went around to the other side of the planet. When he saw the familiar blue planet in the dark starry sky in front of him, he finally showed a relieved smile. Sure enough, this was the moon. Heimdall did send him to the wrong place, but the error was not so big that it was unacceptable. At least he did not send him to other realms. If he was sent to the undead world and had a chance to return to the divine territory, Kale would definitely pin the eternal fire on Heimdall's head. Kale sighed and began to wander around the barren land of the moon. No matter how he imagined it, he could never imagine that one day he would be able to walk alone on the moon without any assistance. There were no signs of life on every inch of the moon, and the surface was full of holes caused by meteorites of various sizes. There were also many irregular scars that seemed to be left behind by other energy sources. After receiving the guidance from the Vice, Kale walked about 2 kilometers in a direction and found a spaceship from Earth parked on the moon. Kale was a little surprised. He carefully observed the appearance of the spaceship in front of him, which was extremely technologically advanced. It was 8 meters tall and had a radius of about 15 meters. The outer shell was specially painted with a silver-white texture. It was supported by a high-pressure mechanical quadrupod that stretched out to support the weight of the spaceship. It looked like a huge metal monster crawling on the ground. There was an image of the American flag on the spaceship. This was obviously not the aviation technology that should have existed at the time he left. When Kale left Earth, it was 1945, not long after World War II. At that time, the concept of aviation technology had just begun. No matter how advanced Earth's technology was, it still needed time to accumulate. How many years have passed on Earth? Kale was silent. Back then he was most worried about going to outer space to seek treatment for his genetic disease, but when he returned, everything had changed. But no matter what, he still fulfilled the promise he made all those years ago, and returned safely as promised. Vice said considerately, "Master, do you want to forcefully hack into the operating system of this American spaceship? It can barely replace the damaged fighter jet and be your ride back to your hometown." "Do I look like that kind of person who would just randomly steal other people's things?" Kale coughed and his heart was slightly moved. He said seriously, "Can you directly hack into the system of this spaceship? How confident are you?" Vice quickly gave a conclusion. "Since we have not come into contact with the current level of technology, mechanical structures and information communication on Earth, we can make a preliminary judgment based on the current known database. If we try to forcefully hack into the spaceship system and use remote control, there is an 89% chance of success. There is a 9% chance of being affected by the spaceship's remote system detection. There is also a 2% chance of failure and exposing your location. Then forget it, the situation on Earth is not clear yet. If we are discovered, then..." Kale and Vice were discussing the topic of snatching or not while facing the spaceship not far away. In the next moment, the door under the spaceship suddenly opened, and a male Caucasian wearing a bloated spacesuit walked down with a detection instrument in his hand. He wanted to carry out the collection and detection operations as usual. Oh my God. When the astronaut looked up and saw Kale standing on the ground in front of him, he was suddenly stunned, showing a horrified expression as if he had seen a ghost. "Since I've been discovered, then there's no other way." Kale smiled faintly and suddenly stomped on the ground. He rushed to the astronaut at a very fast speed and knocked the other party to the ground. Venom consciously derived a black liquid, which turned into a hand that wrapped around the astronaut's body and violently threw him into the cabin like a cargo. At the same time, Vice transformed into a mechanical creature, broke away from Venom's coat, jumped and climbed into the spaceship, and took control of the spaceship from the inside. Chapter 209. 2008. This year, Ellis's votes crushed the rest of the candidates and he became the new president of the United States. This year, Stark Industries' thermal weapons industry spread all over the world. The United States expressed its willingness to support it as the #1 enterprise and to engage in in-depth cooperation. This year, Bana, a biology professor at Culver University in the United States, mysteriously disappeared in a radiation leak in his laboratory several years ago. No one had found his whereabouts until now. Only half of the year had passed, which was the beginning of June. Recently, 2 major events had happened that caused a frenzy on the internet and in the news media. The first event. The chairman of Stark Industries, the world's largest arms dealer, a playboy and a top genius, Tony Stark, demonstrated a bomb specially produced for the United States military outside the military wilderness. On the way back with the military, he was attacked by terrorists, and all the United States soldiers along with him were shot and slaughtered. Tony's body was not found, and it was currently determined that his whereabouts were unknown. Some people were obsessed with Tony's talent and wealth, but more people couldn't help but be jealous and envious. But no matter what, He was a genius engineer who had changed most of the technological landscape of the 21st century. He was a rare talent on Earth. Although he was arrogant, flirtatious, and had many black marks, people still paid enough attention to him. The United States military, on the other hand, was frantically searching for him all over the world. The original newspapers reported the details and analysis of Tani's disappearance day and night until the second event appeared yesterday. The second event. The American spaceship Apollo 8 didn't stay on the moon for a week as scheduled. It didn't make any contact with the Underground Aviation Administration. It switched to autopilot mode and made an emergency return late last night. The Underground Aviation Administration couldn't contact the spaceship. It wasn't until early in the morning that the spaceship was located in the mountains and wilderness of North America. At that time, the spaceship had successfully landed, and the astronaut inside was in a coma and seriously injured state. After research, it was found that there were no signs of intrusion in the spaceship, and the black box surveillance was destroyed by some kind of magnetic interference. Later, after the astronaut recovered, he was detained in the interrogation room by many departments. After a week of interrogation, they still couldn't get any relevant information. The astronaut's mind was normal and his body was healthy, but he repeatedly replied, "I saw a black angel on the moon. Trust me. I was knocked out by the black angel." The mysterious incident of the space dark angel remained unsolved even after thousands of years. It became the world's biggest unsolved mystery and was classified as the country's highest level of archives. Of course, this was all in the future. At this moment, in the remote mountains and wastelands of North America, 10 kilometers away from where the space capsule was forced to land. Boom, boom. The engine roared, and an old off-road Jeep quickly drove through the desert wilderness, raising billowing waves of dust. Inside the car, a mechanical music box that looked like a robot was standing upright on the driver's seat. The speakers were blasting out cool and refreshing electronic music. The rhythm of every note was vibrating at the climax. In the driver's seat sat a young man wearing a hooded jacket and jeans. He was controlling the steering wheel with one hand, and the other hand was leaning outside the window. The strong wind outside blew his bright silver hair up and brushed his forehead. "Vice, what song are you playing?" The silver-haired young man snorted in dissatisfaction. The deafening electronic music in the car stopped abruptly. Then a gentle male voice came from the speakers. "Master, this is the most popular song in America this year. Are you indirectly describing me as an antique?" Cale frowned. After Vice hacked into the space capsule's database, he knew the basic situation of the current era on Earth. He didn't expect that after going through 2 large space-time wormholes and going out into space for less than a month, Earth was already in the 21st century. The year 2008 was more than half a century away from 1945. To be precise, it had been 63 years. 63 years. To a human, this could very well be a lifetime. "Master, you have to admit that if you measure it in terms of Earth's time, there's no doubt that you're almost 90 years old," Vice calmly told him the cruel truth. "So be it," Cale shrugged nonchalantly, narrowed his eyes and said, "Vice? Earth's communication method in the 21st century, if it hasn't changed. It's definitely based on wireless communication in the form of electromagnetic waves, radio waves. Try connecting to the local server to go online and get information on the internet. Can you do that?" Vice's transformed robot opened and closed its speakers as if it was smiling. "Of course, I'm the ancestor when it comes to communication signals." "That's true." Cale smiled too. Vice's original body was modified from the first mobile phone on Earth. It was a true ancestor. "All right then, check all the information about Family Cal in the years that I've been away." It was rare for Cale to be so serious. Vice didn't dare to be negligent and immediately used its system signal source in the form of radio waves. The radio waves were like lines that couldn't be seen clearly. They weaved into a light net and spread out to the surrounding area of several kilometers or even tens of kilometers. It captured passing electromagnetic information and traced it back to the local network server host. System connection activated. Local signal is weak. Successfully changed to satellite signal. Current connection status is good. After successfully connecting to Earth's network, Vice was equivalent to a search engine that came with the internet. At the very least, as long as it was on the Internet of the Information Age, it could read all the information that had been spread. After a while, Vice replied, "All the information related to Family Cal has never appeared on Earth's network." "That's good." After Cale heard that, the corner of his mouth curled up and revealed a smile. "It's good that they didn't expose themselves." They worked so hard to prepare for so long. If they don't know how to hide themselves and operate as a secret force, then they'll be letting me down. Is there any other important information about the new era that needs to be told to you now? Vice asked. No need. Kale refused and said emotionally, let me experience and adapt to this era myself. Then where should we go now? Find Family Cal's hidden base overseas, Master? Vice continued to ask. Let's go to the Stark Industries building in New York and see if the portal there still exists. Kale touched his chin and said thoughtfully. At that moment, a black dot slowly appeared in the sky in front of the Jeep's windshield. It was emitting thick smoke and was getting closer and closer to the ground. Kale looked up sharply and turned the steering wheel. He reacted quickly and slammed on the brakes. The Jeep drifted horizontally on the sand and stopped with a beautiful drift. Chapter 210. Ka. The windshield wipers of the Jeep began to move, clearing the parts and sand that had fallen on the windshield. A man's painful groan came from where the humanoid aircraft had fallen. Kale didn't hesitate. He looked at the vise on the driver's seat and reached out his hand. The vise understood what he meant. Its mechanical body quickly shrank and folded into an ordinary pair of sunglasses. Kale put on the sunglasses and walked out of the car. His eyes fell on the small sand pit in front of him. He saw a broken steel machine lying in the pit. The steel casing had fallen off, revealing a pair of gloved hands that surrounded his body. The broken steel parts on the outside were scattered all over the ground. There were wires and some of them were still emitting sparks and black smoke. Phew! The man gasped in pain. He took off the steel helmet and mask on his head, revealing a mature gentleman's face. He had dry black hair and a small mustache. He was about 30 years old. His face was full of fatigue. His casual long sleeves were stained with blood and smoke. His chest was heaving up and down as he panted. His left hand seemed to be fractured and was held by the other hand. The man seemed to have just experienced a fierce battle and escaped to this place. When he saw the Jeep parked in front of him and Kyle getting out of the car, he hurriedly called out for help. Help me! Please take me away from here. What's in it for me if I save you? Kyle looked down at the gentleman lying on the ground with cold arrogance and said seriously. Tani paused and said without thinking, I have money. Take me away and I'll give you money. Okay, the fare is $100 billion. I promise it's fast and safe. Kale snapped his fingers. 100 billion? Thor's mouth was wide open. Even a billionaire like him was shocked by this sky-high price. Isn't he taking advantage of the situation? Even robbing a bank wouldn't be so ridiculous. You don't want to? Then forget it. Kyle shrugged and decisively turned back to the driver's seat of the Jeep. He didn't forget to whisper, I'm used to honking while driving. I don't know if I'll attract anyone over here later. Hey, don't. Thor had obviously suffered enough at the hands of the terrorists. He was so scared that he quickly struggled to get up from the ground. With a pale face, he pursed his dry lips and said, 100 billion it is, let me get in the car. After a while, the Jeep slowly started, leaving a broken and abandoned Iron Man armor parts on the ground. Tani sat in the front passenger seat and looked out the window at the desert area that was getting further and further away. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief and lie down on the soft leather seat. By the way, remember to write an IOU for me in the car. Kale's cold voice sounded. When Tani heard this, it was as if he had been provoked and humiliated. He stood up in anger and scolded, You bastard, you did it on purpose, didn't you? You definitely know who I am. You. Who are you? Kale asked expressionlessly as he pushed up his sunglasses. I'm Tony Stark. Tony gritted his teeth and said, 100 billion I said I will give you, I will definitely give you, I have never written an IOU in my life. You don't want to write an IOU, right? Then I'll turn around and go back. Kale shrugged. I don't believe it. Tani was only halfway through his words when the Jeep really turned around and accelerated in the opposite direction. Bastard, are you serious? All right, okay. 3 seconds later, Tani's scalp was numb and he completely admitted defeat. He picked up the pen and paper on the dashboard and buried his head in writing with one hand. In this half of his life, except for his father, no one can control his bad temper. But now, encountering a silver-haired young man who seems to be a dozen years younger than him, he is being played with in the palm of his hand. Kale laughed as he watched. Vice, who was in the form of sunglasses, flashed a green-like icon on the inside, and Venom, who was disguised as a coat, also made a strange laugh in his mind. In fact, in front of the Jeep, Kale, Vice, and Venom, the three basically recognized Tani's identity at the same time. Needless to say, Kale Tani was the son of the old gentleman Howard, not to mention that he had the knowledge of a transmigrator, so how could he not recognize the future Iron Man Tani? Vice, connected to the Earth's network, there was so much information about Tani on the internet that it was difficult to ignore, and the existence of its body had a great relationship with the Stark family. Venom, on the other hand, relied on his extraordinary biological perception. According to him, this kid is exactly the same as Howard Weak. In a situation where the three coincided, Kale naturally took care of his big nephew. After all, they were family. Tani sat in the car sullenly. He just lost a close friend who helped him make the first-generation Iron Man armor, and after a battle with terrorists, he was unlucky enough to meet a guy who cheated him of his money. Look at this crappy car and it costs 100 billion? Tani glanced at the interior of the car and suddenly froze. He touched it carefully with his hand and said in surprise, "Is this a 1945 limited edition Jeep? It looks brand new." "It's just a high imitation." Kale smiled indifferently. Tani stopped talking and looked at Kale again. He was a genius engineer and also liked to collect famous cars. How could he not be able to distinguish the authenticity of the car? More importantly, there were only 3 limited edition Jeeps in the world, and one of them had been sealed in his father's old garage for a long time. Looking at the silver-haired young man in front of him, Tani actually thought of his father, and his expression suddenly became gloomy. He hesitated and asked, "Who are you? Why are you in such a place?" "Me." Kale thought for a while and said indifferently, "Just call me Card. As for why I am here, you can fall from the sky wearing a steel suit. Why can't I drive by here?" "Card." Tani muttered to himself. He didn't know why, but he always felt that the young man next to him had an indescribable sense of intimacy. Could it be that he awakened some unknown masochistic tendencies during the weeks he was imprisoned in the terrorist basement? Half an hour later. The Jeep was close to the edge of the desert. A large fighter jet buzzed from low altitude and broadcast a warning to stop. The UA military logo painted on the hull of the fighter jet caused Tani to excitedly stretch out a hand and stick it out of the window, shouting and shaking. "Card. Come back to New York with me. 100 billion US, I won't give you a cent less." Tani looked at Kale and said excitedly, "You haven't given me the money yet. Of course I have to follow you." Kale calmly stopped the car and said coldly, "But remember, don't let others check my identity." "No problem." Tani agreed. "You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.